Chapter 874. However, before Bailey Shangxie could make a move, little Fatty Chung, who was standing at the side, had a devious idea. He thought that even if he couldn't defeat the foreign Bailey Shangxie, he couldn't possibly lose to that country bumpkin. Coincidentally, he still had some pin-up anger to vent. He wanted to vent his anger before his mother came to pick him up. Little Fatty Chung was a classic example of someone who bullied the weak but feared the strong. Without hesitation, he wiped the corners of his mouth and walked toward little Qingchun with a fierce look on his face. He looked like he wanted to snatch the cake. The children in Class 1 stared at the scene with wide eyes. They thought that Qingchun was definitely done for. Little Fatty Chung was the most brutal and unreasonable person. Once he bumped into her, she might even fall over, let alone the cake. However, no one expected that little Qingchun, who was eating the chocolate cake, would suddenly stand up. With a small fork in her hand, she gave a side kick. A loud bang was heard. The big meatball, little Fatty Chung, was sent flying more than a meter away by the wind from the kick. That kind of strength and ruthlessness made Bailey Shangxie, who was standing at the side, raise his eyebrows in surprise. However, he still had a cool look on his face. On the other hand, the surrounding children were all stunned. Qingchun, have you learned Taekwondo before? That kick was so cool. Is that how you kick? Huh? No, that's not how Qingchun kicked just now. Class 1 was completely lively. They crowded in the center and looked at little Qingchun with eyes full of admiration. If one were to describe the feeling, it would be as if they were treating little Qingchun as an amazing cartoon character such as Pleasant Goat. Little Fatty Chung, who was lying on the ground, felt his internal organs hurting badly. This time, he cried even more miserably. After all, little Fatty Chung was a child who cared about his reputation. It was still acceptable that he was beaten up by Bailey Shangxie, who had just returned from abroad. He couldn't tolerate being beaten up by a country bumpkin. If others knew about this, how could he survive in the kindergarten? The more he thought about it, the louder little Fatty Chung cried. Almost everyone in the corridor could hear him. The form teacher was still explaining the situation to Madam Chung. When they heard the commotion in the classroom, the two of them looked at each other and hurriedly ran in. When Madam Chung saw little Fatty Chung sprawled on the ground, her face immediately turned green. Who the hell would do this? When had her son ever suffered like this? Rich Lady Chung was both angry and angry. She patted little Fatty Chung on the back and said to the homeroom teacher, "Teacher Zhang, you have to give me an explanation. My son is here to study. He was not here to be bullied. I never expected you, a teacher with such little experience, to be able to teach my son well. I only wanted you to take good care of my son. But look at my son's face. If anything happens to my son, don't even think about being a teacher anymore." The homeroom teacher of Class 1 did not expect that little Fatty Chung would be beaten up again while she was out for a short while. To be honest, she was also having a headache. It was only the first day of school, and there were already 2 fights. Moreover, little Fatty did not look like someone who could be beaten up so easily. It was strange. Why was he always the one who got injured? Teacher Zhang's expression did not look too good after being angered. She turned around and scolded the children of Class 1. Who did it? She originally thought that it was Bailey Shangxie who beat him up and was about to walk up to him to grab him. Unexpectedly, little Qingchun, who was sitting beside the small wooden table, stood up with his chocolate cake in his hand. He looked at their homeroom teacher with his round eyes. He was still wearing his little white shirt and looked adorably silly. "Teacher, I did it." Teacher Zhang paused. "You?" "Yes." Little Qingchun nodded. Beside her, upper-class Lady Qing shouted, "Teacher Zhang, since the culprit has been found, I hope that you can quickly solve this matter for me." Of course, she recognized little Qingchun's face. He was Hellion Vivian's son. Teacher Zhang pressed her head and said to the upper-class lady, "Madam Chung, please calm down first. I have to ask the child the reason for the fight." "What reason would a poor child have to fight?" "It must be because he was jealous of my son." Upper-class Lady Chung sneered. "He beat my son up to this extent. This kind of student shouldn't be accepted by your kindergarten." Teacher Zhang was at a loss for words after hearing upper-class Lady Cheng's words. Her tone towards little Qingchun also became unpleasant. "Why did you fight?" Legitimate self-defense. Little Ching Chun did not even blink when he said that. Since he was still holding the chocolate cake in his little hands, he looked harmless no matter how one looked at him. But why was it legitimate self-defense again? Teacher Zhang was momentarily at a loss for words. Did children these days know so much? Or were they led astray by Bailey Shangxie, who came back from abroad? Thinking of this, Teacher Zhang couldn't help but look in the direction of Bailey Shangxie. That child was very cool. He looked at everyone as if he was condescending. However, at this moment, he was looking at little Ching Chun with a smile that seemed a little evil. Little Fatty Chung felt a toothache when he heard the words legitimate self-defense. Mom, what is legitimate self-defense? I don't care. It's this country bumpkin's fault for hitting me. Help me teach him a lesson. Get the school to expel him. Little Fatty Chung cried and wailed as the fat on his face shook. Upper-class Lady Chung felt sorry for her son. She quickly agreed, okay. Let's go to the principal's office now. When Teacher Zhang heard that they were going to look for the principal, she quickly persuaded, Madam Chung, the children are still young. It's inevitable that they will bump into each other. There's no need to make such a big fuss, right? What do you mean by making a fuss? Am I making a fuss? Upper-class Lady Chung asked in return. She tried to calm herself down. Teacher Zhang, I have always known that my son has many problems. He may look very domineering, but our family has its own upbringing. He is definitely not a child who will stir up trouble. He is even very kind. However, this is not a reason for him to be bullied. Teacher Zhang felt awkward when she heard this. She really didn't know what to say. At this moment, little Qingxin spoke. Madam, is your family's upbringing to let your son snatch other people's cake? I just said that I was acting in self-defense. If he hadn't snatched my favorite chocolate, I wouldn't have sent him flying with a kick. Chapter 875. Bailey Shangxie kept nodding as he listened. That's right, if it wasn't for my son wanting to snatch that piece of chocolate cake. Now, that piece of cake would have been mine. Needless to say, Ardebeo was also eyeing that piece of chocolate cake. Hellion Qingxun did not understand either. Why was that non-human fellow nodding his head continuously when he was talking? He looked at the other party with a very strange expression. And because of Hellion Qingxun's words, the atmosphere in the classroom had an obvious change. Madame Cheng's face, in particular, looked as if she had been punched hard. She had never thought that her son would be beaten up for this reason. Madame Cheng understood her son's nature. In the past, he had often snatched other children's things, but Madame Cheng had never taken this matter to heart. They were just children, so what was wrong with snatching things? Anyway, their family had plenty of money. They could just give the other party some benefits. Besides, her son didn't have a bad heart. He was usually very willing to help others. Therefore, Madame Cheng had never suffered in this aspect. Now that it was pointed out by a child in such a childish voice, her face burned. Especially that sentence, Madam, is your family's upbringing to allow your son to snatch other people's cakes? Made her feel ashamed. Faced with the gazes of the other children, Madame Chung smiled stiffly and said to the form teacher, Look at this child, he's quite eloquent. He doesn't seem like a 3-year-old at all. No matter what, it's my son who is greedy and thinks that other people's cakes are good. In fact, he has eaten all kinds of cakes. He wants to be close to others, but he doesn't know how to express it. Since it's a misunderstanding, I won't pursue this matter. My son's face still needs to be smeared with ointment when we go back. The form teacher also knew Madame Cheng's identity and didn't want this matter to continue, so he smiled as well. But little Fatty Cheng couldn't accept it. Mom, I've already been beaten up to this extent. Why won't you pursue this matter? Bailey Shangxie was the one who beat me. I didn't snatch his things. He beat me until my teeth hurt. When Madame Cheng heard this, she was angry. So it wasn't just one person who beat her son? Teacher Zhang, how do you explain this matter? The form teacher really couldn't handle it. So he simply said to Bailey Shangxie, Shangxie, tell us the reason why you beat him up. Teacher Little Zhang felt that this child would definitely be able to say something like Hellion Qingxin, so that Madame Cheng would leave quickly. But it turned out that Teacher Zhang didn't understand Bailey Shangxie's personality. He was to say he didn't like to say, there's no reason, I just didn't like him. Teacher Little Zhang, what happened to self-defense? You! Madame Chung had never seen such an arrogant child before. She was so angry that her hands were trembling. Her voice also became extremely sharp and ear-piercing. Just you wait. Sant, let's go to the principal. Bailey Shanxie didn't care. He couldn't even be bothered to look at his wife's face. His eyes were fixed on the chocolate cake in Helian Qingchen's hands. That was his target. Little Qingchen was silent from the beginning to the end. But in her heart, she was thinking of telling Beauty Weiwei when she got home today. The chocolate cake she made smelled so good that someone was peeking at it from the beginning to the end. Achoo! Helian Vivian, who was basking in the sun beside the BMW Tomahawk, sneezed without warning. Then, she raised her eyebrows. Who was talking about her again? Under the sun, the man in a suit was standing beside her and talking to the American wearing sunglasses. His expression was serious throughout the whole process. The rest of the rough men changed their clothes one by one. No, this looks too much like a gangster's. Little boss will be criticized by the children in school. You can't bring a gun there. That's a controlled product. If it's found out, you still have to use your connections. You can just play with it and disassemble it yourself. Don't lead little boss astray. Also, what car are we driving? When Big Boss sent Little Boss to school, she was riding a BMW Tomahawk. We have to be better than her. We can't be inferior. It doesn't matter what car we drive. What's important is that you see if I'm kind enough now. If they were going to kindergarten, they had to dress up nicely. Otherwise, under normal circumstances, with their looks, they would either scare the children or be treated as a bear by the children. No matter which one it was, it would make Little Boss lose face. They had to show off their absolute arrogance and win glory in front of Little Boss. Helian Vivian originally planned to sleep. After all, she was working at night now. During the day, she was too lazy to lift her hands. However, when she saw the group of brothers chattering nonstop, she felt that it was quite interesting. The man in a suit who was in charge of the discussion finally finished. He finished the last sip of his coffee and pushed a small leather box in his hand over. In the box, there were stacks of US dollars. The American took the box and left the car dealership after saying that it was a pleasure to work with them. The man in a suit turned his head and said to Helian Vivian, "Big boss, we just received news that a powerful force is looking for us. They should have arrived in the capital by now. However, our network of connections is not bad. They won't be able to find us in a short time." Yes, I have ears. I heard it. Helian Vivian casually threw the helmet in her left hand away. The corner of her mouth curled into an evil smile. Contact Tang's sect. First, investigate the other party's background. The man in a suit had the same idea. There was nothing in the world that Tang's sect couldn't find out. Who asked them to have the world's most powerful hacker, young Master Tang? Oh, right. Qingchen said that today is his first day of school. He wants to learn to live independently. So after school, he will come back by himself. He asked us not to pick him up. Helian Vivian said as she lazily yawned. The few rough men who were still dressing up suddenly stopped what they were doing. They turned their heads in unison with a look of despair on their faces. Their beautiful dream of picking up Little Boss from school was shattered just like that. Oh no, it couldn't be any crueler. Boring. Why did I start dressing up in the morning? Jean, you're not the worst. The worst is that bear old A. He kept practicing how to smile in front of the mirror so that he wouldn't look like a bad guy. It's quite tough for him. The 98-meter-tall rough man, old A, it was really noisy. Suddenly, a gentle voice sounded in the air. I want to ask if we can catch ghosts here. Chapter 876. The burly men paused for a moment and couldn't help but look behind them. Their eyes were filled with vigilance. Helian Vivian was very direct. Her lips curled into a smile. "Miss, this is a car dealership, not a ghost-catching shop. Did you come to the wrong place? The ghost-catching shop is on the street next door." According to the rules of the underworld, she usually took on business at night. Absolutely no one would come to her during the day. I heard someone say that this place can help you catch ghosts." The man was wearing a gray robe that was stained with grease. He looked at Helian Weiwei eagerly and said, "That man's surname is Tang. He said that as long as I come here, someone will help me." "Young Master Tang?" Helene Vivian's expression changed slightly. She looked at the woman and asked, "Did he give you anything?" "Ah, something?" The woman seemed to remember something. He said, "When I get there, I'll give you the phone." The woman took out the phone that was not worth much from her pocket. As soon as Helene Wei took it, the originally dim screen changed. A silver fox mask suddenly rose up and gradually transformed into a string of words. Not too many, not too few, only 7 words. "This case is yours." The burly men were already used to young Master Tang's ability to hack into any electronic system. The woman who came to Helene Vivian didn't expect her phone to have such a function. She covered her mouth and widened her eyes. "That? What is that?" "Mission card." Helene Wei chuckled softly and returned the card in her palm to her. The woman took it and studied it for a long time. However, the image was gone. "Huh? Where did it go?" Helene Vivian didn't answer her. Tang Sek's secret orders were directly issued by a young Master Tang. Every time, the method was unexpected. The more it was like this, the more protective it was of them. "Tell me, what did you encounter?" Helene Wei casually crossed her long legs to the side. Her smiling appearance could easily make people let down their guard. The woman's eyes immediately overflowed with tears. Her crying voice was somewhat desperate. "My son is missing. I can't find him no matter how hard I try." "Did you call the police?" Helene Vivian asked in a low voice. The woman clenched her fists. "Less than 24 hours. The police said they won't accept it." That is indeed the case. This was also the reason why more and more children had gone missing in recent years. To be honest, 24 hours was too late. However, how can you be sure that your son's disappearance is related to ghosts? This was what Helene Vivian really wanted to ask. The woman looked around and said, "It's not just my son. When the kindergarten started this year, 1 child disappeared every 2 days. Moreover, it was only in the afternoon when school was over. Because the children didn't go missing for long, and the school insisted that they were picked up by relatives. But I know my son. He would never leave with someone he doesn't know." "Kindergarten big class?" Helene Wei raised her eyes. "Is it the kindergarten in our district?" The woman nodded heavily. "I told others that there was something wrong with that kindergarten, but no one believed me. But it's really not right. There's nothing wrong with the kindergarten." Helene Vivian calmly interrupted her, but her brows were furrowed. She looked like she was thinking about something. The woman bit her thin lips. "Even you don't believe me?" "It's not that I don't believe you. I've been to that kindergarten." Helene Vivian paused and said, "My son goes to school there too. He just reported in today. There's nothing wrong with the kindergarten. The most important thing is, who took your son away? But with these conditions, we can't be sure that it's related to ghosts." The woman heard Helene Vivian's words and hesitated. She wanted to say something, but stopped. Helene Vivian smiled and continued, "If you don't tell me everything you know, it will only drag on. The possibility of saving your son will become very small." Actually, the woman couldn't stop crying as she spoke. "More than a month ago, something was wrong with my son. I think you can see it too. Our family's conditions aren't good. His father is an ordinary construction worker. I set up a ramen stall myself. In the afternoon, there were many people eating noodles, so I often went to pick him up very late. At that time, he told me that he always felt that someone was following him. At first, I thought that he was just imagining things. Later, he stopped saying that, so I didn't take it to heart. But a few days before the child went missing, he was clearly alone, but he seemed to be talking to someone in his bedroom. When I asked him, he said that it was a little brother playing with him. There was no little brother in the room. After I heard that, I was very scared, so I went to the great immortal to ask for a talisman. Later, my son finally returned to normal, but he was gone." Helene Vivian heard her words and looked behind her. She chuckled and said, "Besides your son, did you and your husband have another child?" The woman suddenly froze. "You? How did you know?" "I calculated." Helene Vivian looked at the little shadow behind her. "He died in a car accident, right?" When the woman heard this, she almost burst into tears. She could only nod. Ghosts were not supposed to be known to ordinary people, but Helene Wei still told the woman the truth in a roundabout way. "Your son did see a little brother, but that little brother didn't come to hurt him. Instead, It was a natural connection between brothers. He sensed danger and wanted to protect the other party, but his strength was too weak and he couldn't resist the Chinese talisman, so he left the place where he was protecting the other party. If I'm not wrong, after he left, your son was taken away by someone else. Hearing this, the woman seemed to have understood everything. Tears streamed down her face. I thought he was angry with me and his father for giving all our love to Xiao Xiang. That's why he kept pestering Xiao Xiang. Children have always been simple and pure. Whatever you give them, they will give in return. Even if their parents are biased, blood ties are also present at birth. Helian Wei Wei stood up, the light in her eyes slightly heavy as she looked at the setting sun not far away. After that, she turned her head and faced the group of rough men and smiled evilly. Someone is causing trouble in our territory. Aren't they looking down on me too much? Jean, who had a cigarette in his mouth, did not speak. He silently pulled the leather jacket over. Old A, who looked like a big bear, grinned, raised the steel pipe in his hand, and said, "Get him." Chapter 877. It's a must, but first we have to go to the Ghost City to take a look. Since it's a task handed over by young Master Tang, it shouldn't be that simple. As Helian Vivian spoke, she straddled her BMW tomahawk. Her slender fingers pressed down on the helmet, and her eyes looked at the woman. Your son went missing at the school gate, right? The woman wiped her tears and said, That's what the school teacher said. I see. You go back first. I'll let you know when there's news. After Helian Vivian asked clearly, she exerted force in her hand, and the tomahawk rushed out of the street, heading in the direction of the Ghost City. The so-called Ghost City first appeared in the old Beijing city. It was a kind of antique market that opened in the middle of the night to the wee hours of the morning. It usually bought and sold some items that couldn't see the light of day. For example, the possessions of fallen princes, the treasures stolen from the palace by great eunuchs, or the funerary objects obtained from the hands of grave robbers. The sellers set up stalls in the wilderness. If the buyer and the seller were interested, they would make a price in their sleeves without saying a word. The whole market was silent and dark, so it was called the Ghost City. Later, the new China was established, and after experiencing a cultural catastrophe, more and more antiques were scattered among the people. This kind of ghost city naturally began to become popular. For example, Beijing's Panjiayuan and Tianjin's Target Street were examples. However, the current ghost city's opening time was no longer in the middle of the night, but in the early hours of Saturday. When the sky just turned bright, people would come out to set up stalls. Gradually, the antique market was formed. Very few young people knew that there was such a place in the imperial capital. Only the old Beijing people would understand. But Helian Vivian was the only one who rode a tomahawk to the antique market in the morning. Other people always had the appearance of a master, either holding a fan in their hand or playing with a walnut. It was now afternoon, approaching dusk, and it was Monday. There were only a few people in Panjiayuan, otherwise they would have to stare at Helian Vivian. Since they came to the Ghost City, they naturally had to go through the Ghost City's route. He took out a piece of paper as a knock on the door. A short while later, the unassuming wooden door in the old alley opened. A young man walked out from inside, holding a tortoise in his hand. After seeing Helian Wei Wei, he raised his eyebrows. You are? If the King of Hell wants someone dead at midnight, he won't let them live until midnight. Helian Vivian walked in with her long legs and said, I'm here to check something. When the young man heard the slogan, he saw her holding a piece of paper in her hand and holding the turtle to pick it up. Every trade had its own rules. Only when the tortoise recognized the underworld money could the business be considered accepted. On the other hand, the young man hadn't heard this slogan for a long time. He thought that his master was bluffing him, so he couldn't help but look at Helian Vivian a few more times. Helian Vivian smiled the whole time. As soon as she entered the room, she hit the back of the head of the man sitting in the middle of the alley, who was pretending to be a master. Monkey, that's enough. Don't pretend anymore. Take off your sunglasses. You really think you're blind. When Monkey heard this voice, he immediately cried out, Boss, my mother. Why are you here? Of course, I'm here to check something. Helian Vivian took his sunglasses and looked at them. It's a famous brand. You're doing well. Monkey chuckled. Isn't it because people nowadays believe in blind people touching bones? I'm just pretending. The young man seemed to have never seen his master like this. He was completely dumbfounded and stared blankly. Monkey reminded him, "Hey, what are you doing? Go and get a drink. Open your master's bottle of Lafite. Boss loves to drink red wine the most." "All right, I'm not drinking today." Hellion Vivian put down his sunglasses. "Chin is going to school. You know that, right?" Monkey's face was solemn. "I have to know about little boss." "Boss, let me tell you, old A and the rest can stop being so insidious. I said that I was going to send little boss to school, but they refused. They even said that if I were to go, the children in school would definitely think that little boss is a cheat." "How do I look like a cheat?" "You don't look like one. You are clearly one," Hellion Vivian said with a smile. Monkey was instantly speechless. After a while, he said, "Even if I'm a cheat, I'm a high-level cheat. I remember you saying that you are very familiar with the principal of Chinchin's kindergarten." Hellion Vivian's thin lips curled up. When Monkey heard this, his eyes lit up. "Boss, could it be that little boss had encountered some difficulties in school? I'll get someone to settle it now. In 2 words, deal with him." Hellion Vivian. Her group of brothers, really, even the way they speak is the same. Seeing that Hellion Vivian didn't object, Monkey still muttered, "What did I say? I said that it's best if I send little boss to school. When their principal sees me, it's as if he's worshipping Guanyin Bodhisattva. Little boss won't be at a disadvantage there, right? Not letting you go is Chinchin's idea." Hellion Vivian raised an eyebrow. "If you insist on doing it, I won't stop you." Monkey was completely silent this time. "Little boss's idea. Then forget it. I'll just stay here obediently." He couldn't let little boss hate him. He had to show more face in front of little boss and win his favor. "Good boy." Hellion Vivian held back her laughter and patted the other party's head. "Since you're familiar, then it's easy. Their kindergarten hasn't been very peaceful recently. Help me hack into their system. I want to see the surveillance camera at the school gate." "Not very peaceful?" Monkey frowned and pulled open the bookshelf at the side. Behind the bookshelf were 4 computers, the brand of which was the most high-end Alien. These 4 computers all use virtual IPs. Not only that, there were also several routers in the room, all for the sake of getting rid of tracking. Of course, the better the hacker, the faster the speed. There was no need for too much concealment, because when he hacked in, he would sweep away all the traces he left behind, such as young Master Tang. Monkey was also from the Tang sect. He was in charge of this area. Once the main computer was turned on, the 4 computers ran at the same time. He sat in front of the computer, his fingers quickly typing on the keyboard. For some unknown reason, the computer screen suddenly turned black. Various English codes kept appearing on it, finally stopping on a teacher's office page. "Found it?" Monkey stared at the screen. "This should be very fast. Use the chat software to hack in, then enter the school network. Finally confirm." Chapter 878. "Pa!" The crisp sound of the keyboard rang out. As soon as Monkey finished speaking, the images on the 4 screens immediately changed, showing the scene at the entrance of the kindergarten. This is today's video. Monkey's fingers were still on the keyboard. In order to allow Hellion Vivian to better observe, he divided each image into 4 parts. Hellion Vivian originally wanted him to directly switch to the day the child went missing, but after seeing this morning's video, she suddenly paused. "Wait a minute. Why isn't the video from 9 a.m.? The video from 9 a.m.? Monkey frowned and switched back the video, his eyes widening. "It's really not there. The time on the video has disappeared by 5 minutes. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. 9 a.m., which was the video that appeared after she sent her son to school. Thinking of this, she moved the mouse twice and finally fixed it on a Lamborghini sports car. Her eyes were filled with coldness. The video disappeared after this carriage appeared. Later, check the owner of this car. Okay. Monkey was very fast. Hellion Vivian didn't stop thinking. Now switch the time. Look at the time when the kindergarten ended yesterday. It should be around 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Monkey followed Hellion Vivian's instructions and pressed a few buttons on the keyboard. The strange thing happened again. This time, the time didn't jump. Instead, the video completely turned white. It was as if there was a malfunction in the video, causing it to crackle. "What's going on? It's so strange," Monkey said as he frowned. At this moment, Helian Wei's eyes darkened. Someone is targeting this kindergarten. It wasn't a ghost. She didn't feel any evil aura. Instead, it was the scene from this morning that seemed more like something was wrong. Since it wasn't a ghost, it was man-made. From Helian Vivian's experience, man-made situations were usually more troublesome than ghosts. However, the culprit's target was too strange. Logically speaking, if someone wanted to kidnap a child, they would definitely choose someone rich. The kindergartens in this area were all for elites. Many children of high officials and nobles would be sent there. It was clear at a glance that the family conditions of the clients who came to see her today were not very rich. Then why did the other party kidnap a child from such a family? Unless the other party wasn't looking for a ransom. It seemed that the other party was very smart. The imperial capital was different from other places. Kidnapping and extorting in such a city was undoubtedly asking for trouble. Since it was not for the ransom, there was only one other possibility: child trafficking. According to the crime statistics, child trafficking in China had reached a peak. Under normal circumstances, missing children were usually between 1.5 years old to 4.5 years old. This was because children at this age did not have complete memories and were easy to control and carry away. Even if they cried, it would not attract the attention of others because everyone would think that the child was throwing a tantrum and would not think of the problem from the perspective of abduction. Monkey continued to attack the opponent's network. Check the school's documents and see if these missing children are between the ages of 1.5 to 4.5 years old. Helian Wei quickly cut to the chase. Monkey was not idle. His fingers quickly scrolled down. That's right. The oldest is only 4 years old. Most of them are 3 years old. As expected, this was an organized and premeditated abduction. It was very unusual. Helian Vivian was so sure because of the other party's speed of abduction and the use of high-tech hacking to erase evidence of the crime. Moreover, they were very clear about the time when the police were dispatched. For a mature criminal organization, 24 hours was more than enough time to transfer the child to any place. After all, children at this age did not need an identity card to enter the high-speed rail. The imperial capital was a place where transportation were located. It was too easy to transfer them. Helian Wei quickly realized how tricky this case was. Since it was handed to her by young Master Tang, the same situation must have happened to other kindergartens as well. The Tang sect was loyal to the Huaxiao Empire. Every generation of people had to join the army. In many cases, the Tang sect would secretly solve problems that people did not realize. This time, it should be the same. With this thought in mind, Helian Vivian asked Monkey to hack into the other kindergartens. Sure enough, the same situation happened in all the kindergartens in the district. However, because the matter had not spread, people did not realize the connection between the two. The other party's targets were children from poor families. It was inevitable that there would be times when such children would not be seen by their parents. For example, when they were late to pick them up, even if there was an abduction, it would not be dealt with immediately. This was because the other party did not have the ability to override other forces. But where were they going to sell so many children at once? While Helian Vivian was deep in thought, it was time for the children in the kindergartens in the other district to be released from school. Bailey Shanxia was still thinking about how to beat little Qingchen into submission and take her as his follower. So, as soon as school was out, he followed behind little Qingchen coolly. Little Qingchen was still holding half of the chocolate cake in his hand. He was carrying a small school bag on his back. He planned to eat it while walking. In the past, at this time, the devil dog would show up majestically. Today, Little Black did not appear. Instead, it was replaced by a guy who was not human. Little Qingchen turned around and looked at Bailey Shanxia. Bailey Shanxia immediately raised his eyebrows. Evil and bloodthirsty. Little Qingchen immediately made up her mind to let him follow her. When they reached the car dealership, she would catch him and bring him to Beauty Vivian. She would see that there were still good-looking monsters in this world. If possible, she would like to raise one. Thinking of this, little Qingchen looked behind her again. Her little face was full of seriousness. She would raise him. He could fight, and he had the same function as Little Black. Our crazy and cool DeBeo did not know what the other party was thinking. Anyway, his idea was the same from beginning to end. Beat the other party, make the other party be his follower, and steal the other party's chocolate cake. The two little people walked one after the other. Each had their own thoughts, waiting to see who would make the first move. Little Ching Chun was still a little shaky when she walked, but Bailey Shanxia was different. From beginning to end, he was noble and had the unique elegance of a demon. However, compared to his father, he had more of a dark demon aura. At this time, a man in a navy blue shirt looked left and right. While little Ching Chun was looking back, he came to her side. Chapter 879. He didn't know how fast and vigilant little Ching Chun was. He also didn't know that little Ching Chun had noticed him as soon as he left the school gate. However, little Ching Chun didn't take him seriously. Compared to this man, he was more concerned about whether his chocolate cake would be snatched away by that inhuman guy. At the school gate, the man naturally wouldn't be too obvious. Moreover, he wasn't acting alone. There was a woman behind him. The woman was carrying a baby about the same age as little Ching Chun. The baby was the goods they had just obtained through abduction, although it was a little cruel to describe a child as a goods. However, in this notorious business, they called children goods. They specialized in selling and abducting women and children for a living. Their humanity had long been obliterated. The children they abducted were usually slightly older and weren't as easy to deal with as babies. Some of the sensible and smart goods would be dealt with directly. They would even be made into disabled children who could easily arouse the kindness of others. They would specialize in professional begging and never see the light of day again. Their modus operandi was also quite mature. Under normal circumstances, they would first let the goods be in a relatively quiet state. For example, the baby in their arms now. The road was bustling with people and cars, but even such a movement didn't wake him up. The baby was nestled in the woman's arms with his head tilted. He seemed to be in a deep sleep, but his closed eyes were red and swollen. The man bent down and smiled at little Ching Chun. He looked very harmless. "Little friend, is there a pharmacy nearby? My child is sick. I want to sell some cold medicine." Little Ching Chun glanced at him without a change in expression. The man didn't seem to expect such a reaction. He called out again, "Little friend, follow me. I'll take you there." Little Ching Chun took a small spoon and took a bite of the chocolate cake before speaking slowly. The man's eyes lit up. "Then it can't be better. Thank you, friend." Children were so easy to deal with. It seemed that when there was no one around, they would be able to kidnap him. Thinking of this, the man looked back and exchanged glances with the woman who was carrying the baby. Their eyes were filled with a meaning that only they knew. There were 2 abduction missions today. Apart from the baby in the woman's arms, the other target was the child named Hellion Ching Chun. According to the information they received, this child came from a very ordinary single-parent family. His family owned a car repair shop. When school started, he was teased by the children, saying that he was a little poor boy. Even if such a child was lost, it would not cause any impact. When the man was thinking about these things, an obvious black fog rose from his body. That was the evil thought that came from the human heart. Such creatures were no different from evil ghosts in the eyes of demons. Bailey Shanxia watched from behind with his hands in his pockets, looking very cool. After hearing what little Ching Chun said, he raised his eyebrows. His first reaction was that his chocolate cake was going to be stolen. Without saying anything, he immediately followed them domineeringly. The man smiled at little Ching Chun, but his left hand was hanging by his side, as if he was holding something. Upon closer inspection, one would realize that it was a handkerchief. However, before the man could do anything, a police station appeared on the scene. A police station appeared in front of him. There was a policeman standing there, holding an electric baton in his hand. The man was not stupid. On the contrary, he was very smart and his reaction was very quick. After seeing the police officer, he immediately realized something and quickly threw the handkerchief away. He looked at little Ching Chun with vigilance. This child was doing it on purpose. He had abducted so many children, but he had never encountered such a child who actually wanted to bite him back. At this moment, little Qingqian had already walked to the police officer's side. Her round eyes were like black gems as she pointed at the man. "There's something wrong with him." The police officer frowned and looked up at the man. The man was a bold and meticulous veteran. He was very calm and did not panic in the face of an unexpected situation. Instead, he anxiously asked the police officer, "Hello, my child has caught a cold. Where's the emergency pharmacy?" The police officer saw that he did not seem to be pretending. He then glanced at the listless child and an equally anxious woman. He did not take little Qingqian's words seriously and pointed to his left. The man immediately said, "Thank you." His grateful appearance dispelled the police officer's doubts. Little Qingqian narrowed her eyes and said in a heavy voice, "I said, there's something wrong with that man. Little kid, Uncle is very busy. Did you get lost? The school is over there. Be good and wait for your parents to come." The police officer's attitude was very good, and he was very concerned about little Qingqian. However, it was impossible for him to trust the judgment of a 3-year-old child. Moreover, a car happened to stop at this moment. The person sitting inside was Mrs. Chung, and he was familiar with the license plate number. He had to greet her, so he ignored little Qingqian. Seeing this, little Qingqian did not say anything. Instead, she carried her little cake and walked in the direction the man had left. As for Bailey Shangxia, of course, he followed the chocolate cake wherever it went. Seeing that there were fewer and fewer people, little Qingqian also stopped moving. At this moment, 2 groups of fake couples appeared behind him. The 4 people looked at him together, and one of them was the man who had asked for directions just now. He reached out and knocked away the chocolate cake in little Qingqian's hand. Then, he held a handkerchief in his hand and covered little Qingqian's mouth. Little Qingqian could avoid the follow-up actions. But now, he was completely furious. How dare they knock away the chocolate cake that Beauty Wei Wei made for him? He must make this group of people pay the price. Bailey Shangxia was also covered. He was taken away because he had the same idea as little Qingqian. However, demons were usually more violent under normal circumstances. He had been looking at half a piece of chocolate for an hour and was about to snatch it, but it was knocked away just like that. He had destroyed their nest, so he, Bailey Shangxia, would write the 4 words in reverse. When the woman saw Bailey Shangxia, she frowned heavily. This child is not in the mission. Looking at his clothes, he should be quite well-to-do. Why did you kidnap him? We can't help it. These 2 brats are very evil. They followed us all the way and even led us to the police. You guys watch carefully. Don't let these 2 brats cause any trouble for us. Chapter 880. As the man spoke, he stuffed Bailey Shangxia and Hellion Qingqian into the van. Then, he followed them into the van, rolled down the window, locked the door, and drove towards the train station. Along the way, the roads were all bright. The more it was like this, the less likely it was to arouse suspicion. There were thousands of cars running on the roads in the capital every day. As long as it was not a special occasion, they would not open the car door for inspection. Moreover, the van looked very ordinary on the surface, which was very suitable for an outsider entering the capital. The advantage of such a van was that nothing could be seen from the outside, but it was very clear from the inside. Someone else was driving. As he turned the wheel of the car, he handed over more than a dozen train tickets to the 2 groups of fake couples. He spoke with an accent. Get ready. As usual, all of you will sit together. As he spoke, he glanced into the rearview mirror and immediately frowned. He slammed on the brakes and said, "Why is there another child? I won't be at ease if I don't catch him. This child saw our action. If the police ask later, it's very likely that he will become a source of trouble. Anyway, it doesn't matter if we catch 1 or 2. The child of the family selling sesame seed cakes is easier to control. It doesn't matter if we send him away later. Let's sell these 2 goods first." As the man spoke, he covered Bailey Shangxia's nose with his handkerchief again. When the driver saw this, he knew that there was no turning back, so he simply gave them 2 sets of shabby clothes. Change the leather jackets and white shirts that the 2 brats are wearing. They're too eye-catching. Not only were the clothes eye-catching, but the 2 children were also very handsome. They did not look like the children of ordinary families. The traffickers moved quickly. In a few seconds, they changed Bailey Shangxie and Little Qingqin's clothes. However, they still kept their pants. After all, it would not affect anything. Once everything was done, the man placed the two little ones in a seat with their heads against each other. This was a common trick used by high-level traffickers. Sometimes, if conditions permitted, it was easier to abduct two children than to abduct one, because the illusion of warmth would allow them to pass unimpeded in the event of an inspection. Sigh, when these two brats closed their eyes, they really looked like a pair of brothers. After entering the van, the woman clearly relaxed. She munched on sunflower seeds and looked behind her as she spoke. The man yawned and didn't care at all. Children don't all look the same, but these two are really too good-looking. Remember to cover their faces with collars when we get to the train station later. Let's take a nap now. When we get on the train, we have to brace ourselves to deal with it. The woman knew that what the man said made sense, so she closed her eyes as well. Other than the driver, the rest of the people wanted to take some time to rest. No one noticed that the fingers of the two little fellows beside each other moved. They were clearly awake and had not been drugged. This was especially true for Bailey Shangxie. Not only did the drug not make him fall asleep, but it also made his eyes turn even redder. Of course, little Qingqin noticed the unusual aura on this non-human. She clenched her little hand and grabbed his wrist, meaning that he shouldn't ruin her plan. It was the first time that Bailey Shangxie was grabbed by someone. He opened his eyes and glanced at little Qingqin. He looked very cool. In fact, it was very easy to deal with this group of people. They were just a few stupid humans. At most, he would eat their souls in one bite. However, Bailey Shangxie had never taken a train before. He didn't mind taking a trip to experience the human experience. What's more, he said that he would destroy the other party's nest. Thinking of this, Bailey Shangxie closed his eyes again. He probably felt that this position was good. He, who had never had any communication with his peers, lazily leaned against little Qingqin and fell asleep. This was basically the time when the children would be sleepy. Especially little Qingqin, who had sat in the classroom for the entire day, was also sleepy now. He emptied his thumb, put it in his mouth, and fell asleep while biting it. It was said that blood was connected. This principle was not false at all. Even Bailey Shangxie and Hellion Qingqin didn't know that when they leaned their heads against each other, their sleeping posture was the same. The night outside the window gradually darkened. It was 7:15 p.m. This was the time when the railway station had the largest flow of people. According to statistics, there were more than 300,000 people who would transfer at this station in Beijing West every day. Among them, there were countless intellectuals, people from all walks of life, and countless migrant workers. The railway station was bustling with activity. There was not a moment of silence. Everyone was checking their tickets and entering the station. Dusty bags were squeezing around. Some people were carrying rolled quilts. This was not like the south of Beijing, where the high-speed rail was used. It was relatively more difficult to control. The security personnel mainly looked at whether the ID card and the ticket could be matched. As long as they met the standards and did not carry any dangerous goods, they would be allowed to pass. It was simply a fantasy to ask them to spare time to check whether the children were unconscious. After all, their work was very tiring. It was already very difficult to sit there and continuously check and check. That was what the human traffickers valued, which was why they chose to board the train here. The train left at 7:30 p.m. This was also the time when the parents would discover that their children were really missing. But so what? They had already brought their children on the train. It had to be said that their plan was perfect. The only mistake was that they abducted the wrong people. The sound of the train rang. Beijing's sky was completely dark. Outside the car dealership not far from Panjiayuan, 5 rough men stood in a row. It's already 7:30 p.m. Why isn't Little Boss back yet? The New Orleans chicken wings I roasted for Little Boss are cold. Could it be that Little Boss is lost? How is that possible? Have you forgotten? Little Boss always has a photographic memory. Only an idiot like you would get lost. Don't be noisy. S is driving to school. He should be back soon. The one who was relatively calm was L, who was holding a dismantled iron pipe. But before S came back, Hellion Vivian's BMW Tomahawk appeared. The lines were smooth and beautiful. She braked handsomely. Then, she took off her helmet and raised her eyebrows. "What are you all standing here for?" The five rough men looked at each other and said seriously in unison, "Waiting for little boss." "Chinchin is not back yet?" Hellion Vivian paused and frowned. It was only half an hour's journey from here to the kindergarten. Even if he wanted to take Little Black for a walk, he should be back by now. Chapter 881. Just as Hellion Wei Wei was thinking about this, the sound of another car braking could be heard. It was the modified Hummer driven out by Suit Man S. His expression did not look good. It could even be said to be ugly. This was a strong contrast to his usual gentleness when he was flirting. Even when facing the most powerful enemy, he had never shown such an expression. With a bang, the car door was slammed shut. S didn't even have the time to greet Hellion Vivian. He clenched his fists and threw out a bomb. "Little boss is missing." These 6 simple words instantly changed the relaxed atmosphere in the surroundings. "S, what did you say?" Old A, who didn't smile, was like those outlaws that were often seen in movies. At this moment, the scar on his face had an obvious chill. S rubbed his face. "I went to the kindergarten." The kindergarten teacher didn't know how Little Boss disappeared. At that time, she was dealing with a fight in class. She said that Little Boss beat someone up. She wanted Little Boss and another child to wait in the classroom. She didn't expect Little Boss and that child to disappear just as she finished chatting with the parents. The security guard also confirmed that Little Boss had indeed left the school and even talked to a man who looked like a relative. He should have been picked up by the relative. This is fucking bullshit. Other than us, Little Boss doesn't have any relatives. This is simply, it's not missing. Hellion Vivian, who hadn't gotten out of the car, interrupted S. Her eyes turned completely cold. "It's abduction." Abduction? It wasn't just the 5 burly men. Even the young L jumped up and threw the steel pipe in his hand. They were already unhappy that the other party was doing business with children in their territory. Now, they even dared to touch Little Boss. Were they looking for death? L was the most direct. Without a word, he took out all his equipment from the garage and said coldly, "Let's go." The calmest person in the group was probably Hellion Vivian, his mother. She looked at the few brothers in front of her who looked like they were about to kill someone. She wasn't very agitated because she knew that there weren't many people in the world who could hurt Chinchin. However, to dare to kidnap her son, the other party was indeed tired of living. It was one thing for Hellion Vivian not to worry, but it was another thing for her son to be touched. "Old A, call Monkey and tell him to come to the garage immediately." As Hellion Vivian spoke, she dismounted from her battle axe and tossed her helmet aside. Her waist-length, chestnut-colored hair fluttered in the wind, and she exuded the aura of a queen. She was beautiful and fierce. S sent out a notice. "Tell all the organizations that the ghosts have returned." Hearing the last sentence, the 6 men were all shocked. Their eyes were filled with a light that they hadn't seen in a long time. Suitman S's cell phone held almost all the secret and blocked contact information. A small email was sent out. The world's top firearms organization, Spectre, had reappeared. The Southeast Asian side did not know what had happened and immediately contacted the other side. They were afraid that they had offended the mercenary queen. Of course, there were also those who were not afraid of death. After all, 3 years was a very long time. Even if the ghosts were resurrected, they might not be as glorious as before. They did not forget that the reason why the ghosts went into hibernation was because their boss was severely injured. Even now, no one knew whether he was alive or dead. However, more than 90% of the people were still very afraid of them. This was especially so for the big boss of the Ayaman sect, which was located closest to Huaxia and was famous for its gambling. He was so shocked that he immediately gave S a call. His lips trembled as he held a cigar in his mouth. "S, I am." Suitman had now resumed his attitude towards outsiders and was very professional. The big boss immediately stated, "I only deal in casinos now." What he meant was, "Don't mess with me. I don't touch firearms and I didn't offend you." Hellion Vivian saw the call and raised her eyebrows. "Who is it?" Of course, the big boss on the other side heard the voice, and his scalp immediately went numb. He did not forget the scene when the other party almost took his life back then. Suitman smiled and said to Hellion Vivian beside him, "It's Uncle Gua. Pass the phone to me." Hellion Vivian did not beat around the bush. Hearing this, the big boss's skin tensed up and he quietly waited for the voice on the other side of the phone. "Uncle Gua." Hellion Vivian curved her thin lips and her eyes were shining. "Do you want to do a business deal?" The big boss paused, as if he did not expect Hellion Vivian to say this. "Business? What kind of business?" "I'm currently investigating a child trafficking case. It should be an international case, exported from the mainland to the outside world. As for where the child is sold to, I'm not sure yet. You can tell all the organizations now that I want to completely eliminate this trafficking gang. Those who are willing to cooperate with me will naturally be rewarded." Hellion Vivian had always been like this. Using all the resources available was her style. Different from the ancient times, this was the modern era, her territory. The group of human traffickers would never have thought that they would become the wanted targets of all the organizations just because of a child. If it was to avoid the people of the legal world, they had the experience and the means. It could even be said that it was easy. However, if the enemy was also a criminal organization, they would definitely face unexpected consequences. After hanging up the phone, the information network was fully activated. Monkey carried his laptop and quickly rushed to the car dealership. Hellion Vivian analyzed in her mind. After a skilled human trafficker abducts a child, they will quickly take the train and leave the original city. For such a large-scale and planned human trafficker, they will definitely prepare the tickets in advance. There will be people in charge of receiving the child and people in charge of the abduction. They will not go to the south of Beijing. The security in the south of Beijing is too tight, and there are too few cars in the north of Beijing. Monkey, check the ordinary trains that leave between 6:30 p.m. and 8 p.m. in the west of Beijing. Yes, the speed of the invasion this time was relatively slower. After all, this was not the school network, but the train system. However, this was not a problem for Monkey. The laptop was connected to the big screen, and countless sports cars started faintly in the garage. They were waiting for the answer before setting off together. The image would be transmitted in the form of a video to the navigation system of every sports car. This meant that now, except for Hellion Vivian, everyone could see the results of the investigation. Monkey's eyes were fixed on the characters on the computer screen. His fingertips moved quickly, as if he was avoiding some kind of tracking. "Boss, I got it. However, we only have 15 minutes. Once the 15 minutes are up, I have to erase the traces of the access." Chapter 882. 15 minutes is enough. Hellion Vivian supported herself with her left hand and straddled the sofa with her long legs. She looked at the computer and said into the Bluetooth headset in her left ear, "SL, you guys are in charge of positioning. Gold, Olde, you guys are in charge of screening." Human traffickers like to send a man and a woman together and pretend to be husband and wife. Some of them even have special means to deal with it. Pay more attention to the couples who don't have a package but are dressed like a country bumpkin. Yes, the expressions on their faces couldn't be ignored as they entered work mode. Hellion Vivian's hand quickly scrolled down. It was difficult for the police to conduct strict checks on the suspects on the train. If they were able to get away with it, it would be difficult to catch the scum on the road. Now that the transportation was so convenient, wouldn't it be easy to change the route? Change? Hellion Vivian seemed to have caught on to something important. Her eyes flashed. "Monkey, use another computer to check who changed trains more than 3 times in the past 2 days." "Roger." The crisp sound of tapping on the keyboard echoed in the empty garage. In just 15 minutes, there were too many scenes to count. Even if certain conditions were eliminated, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack to find someone. Most importantly, based on the traces of the kindergarten's camera being erased, there should be a veteran among the suspects who would notice the surveillance. Hellion Vivian frowned and held the laser pointer to freeze the images one by one on the screen. In the end, she found 19 couples that met the criteria. "Boss, time is almost up." Monkey was constantly paying attention to the attacks on the screen and was ready to retreat as soon as the time was up. Helly and Vivian circled the last image with the laser pointer and said resolutely, "Retreat." Another series of typing sounds rang out. Regardless of whether it was Monkey or the others, all of them quickly erased all traces, not leaving anything that could be traced. On this day, no one knew what had happened. The train system announced to the public that it was under maintenance and that the network was suspended. By the time they discovered the problem, the other party had already retreated. On the other hand, the netizens who bought tickets frowned. They felt that the train system had been hacked. This system generally had its own rules. It would only be repaired after 11 p.m. It was not even 8 p.m. yet, which was the time when people urgently booked tickets. Why would the system be repaired? Soon, a technical analysis post appeared on Jihu. The analysis post was anonymous, but one could not tell that the person was very knowledgeable about computers. According to his analysis, the train network system was definitely hacked by a high-level organization. According to him, no one was aware of it, and even the management of the train network system still didn't know why the other party had hacked into the system. He had also tried to track them down, but the IP addresses were from several different internet cafes. This was something that only the best of the best could do. After the technical analysis was posted, an announcement was made on the train network system. It said that the scalpers had tried to engage in illegal activities, but they had been found out and stopped. Once the announcement was made, the technical analysis post was also banned. Some people who didn't understand really believed it, but the smart hackers smelled the hidden message. Someone was definitely doing something. Monkey, how is it? Did any of the 19 couples change stations midway? Helly and Vivian asked this because human traffickers would not choose to travel on long-distance trains. This was because it was very likely that they would face sudden interrogations, and even children would wake up. Generally speaking, the more skilled a human trafficker was, the more likely they were to change stations midway. This was to make it easier to control the goods. As long as the goods were under control, everything would be fine. There are 5 couples. Monkey pressed the space bar, and the identities and train numbers of those people were immediately displayed. Helly and Vivian looked at the pictures, and the corners of her mouth curled up sinisterly. She put on the Bluetooth earpiece and said, "You've received the pictures, right? Remember their information and train numbers. Now, we'll start to locate them and chase after them separately." As soon as she finished speaking, the garage of the shabby car shop opened completely. 6 limited edition sports cars rushed out almost at the same time. Each of them had beautiful performance curves. This made the beauties who came to repair the cars open their mouths wide. They watched the 6 sports cars set off together. Such a cool scene made them want to scream. Most importantly, they always came here to get their cars repaired, so they were very clear about the situation of this car repair shop. It was just a group of ordinary people, and there were even prisoners working there. Although the economic situation was not bad, they were not that rich. Furthermore, the exterior was old and shabby. How could there be so many luxury cars hidden? Helly and Vivian ignored the reaction outside and reached out to take her helmet. She looked back and asked, "Monkey, did you find the car I asked you to find?" "I found it, but—" Monkey paused and continued, "The owner of that car is very mysterious. I followed the clues and dug deeper, but one thing is clear. The Lamborghini went to send someone to school that day. I went to the kindergarten and asked. A teacher saw it and said that the child was also in the first class and was in the same class as Little Boss. There's one thing I didn't care about before, but I have to say it now. Boss, that child disappeared with Little Boss." Helly and Vivian stopped in surprise and raised her eyebrows. What happened? The 2 of them were abducted together? It seems to be the case. Monkey touched the bridge of his nose. But that child's parents seem to be calmer than you, boss. They didn't go to the school to look for their son. Helly and Vivian touched her chin with her slender fingers. This time, the traffickers abducted children from ordinary families. They even specifically targeted children who were slightly poor. Chin should have been mistaken for a poor student, but the child driving the Lamborghini was also abducted? This is not normal. The traffickers probably had no choice but to take him away. Wait a minute. Monkey angrily interrupted Helly and Vivian. Boss, are you saying that Little Boss was abducted because the traffickers thought that Little Boss was poor? Little Boss was poor? Damn it. He was going to donate a teaching building to the kindergarten in Little Boss's name. Chapter 883. Hellion Vivian coughs softly. Why are you so agitated? I can't tolerate the fact that Little Boss is poor. Monkey stood up with a bang. Hellion Vivian comforted him. All right, let's talk about it after we find him. Soon, those people will know that kidnapping Qin is the biggest mistake they have made in their lives. We must destroy them. Monkey was still angry. Hellion Vivian thought for a while. Even if we can't find the owner of the Lamborghini, we should be able to spread the news and tell him again that his son has been kidnapped. Okay. Monkey calmed down a little, thinking that the owner of the car was definitely not an ordinary person. If he joined them, they would be able to find them faster. After that, Hellion Vivian didn't say anything else. She put on her helmet, crossed her long legs over the battle axe, and rushed out of the car. 5 minutes later, in a luxurious villa buried deep in the capital, roses covered the entire wall, as if no sunlight could penetrate it. A tall and straight man was sitting in front of the large floor-to-ceiling glass window. His slender legs were crossed, and his head was lowered as he listened to the report of the people below. He supported his chin lazily with one hand, looking completely indifferent. The silver-white hair on his forehead fell down and blocked his eyes, making it difficult to see his appearance clearly. All he could see was the smooth curve of her chin. However, with him as the center, there was an ethereal black fog behind him. There seemed to be something hidden in the black fog that could surge out at any time. Mr. Bailey, this is the news I received. Little young Master Shangxia has been kidnapped. The middle-aged man knelt on the ground, his teeth chattering as he said, We will inform the people in the school to look for him and see if anyone knows where he went. Upon hearing this, Bailey Jiaju glanced sideways at her. His eyes were long and narrow, slightly slanted upward, exuding a faint sharpness. His skin was pale white, and from afar there was a kind of morbid coquettishness. It made him look like a vampire aristocrat who lived in the 19th century, arrogant and indifferent. I will look for her myself. How is the matter that I asked you to investigate? The expression of the man who was swept by him changed. An unconcealable fear leaked out from his swaying pupils. He stuttered as he replied, What Mr. Bailey is looking for, I'm still investigating. However, in China, it can't be compared to in the West. Some methods can't be used. I still need a bit of time to determine whether or not that Miss Hellion is in the capital. 3 days. Beligaju looked at him coldly. Director Zhang, I will only give you 3 days. 3 days? Director Zhang wiped his cold sweat. Isn't this a little too rushed? Beligaju laughed, his voice. You think it's too short? This is the longest time I will give you to live. As soon as his voice fell, the black fog behind him surged for a while. It seemed like there were countless demons hiding in it, and each of their eyes were as red as blood. Director Zhang immediately felt his throat choked, and he didn't have the courage to refute. He said hurriedly, Sir, don't worry, I will definitely find her. I will use all my power now to continue the search. Only then was Bailey Jiaju satisfied. He asked the shadow behind him to make way for Director Zhang. Director Zhang saw this and didn't dare to stay at all. He ran out of the villa in 2 steps, scared out of his wits. Outside the villa, little Fatty Cheng's father, Cheng Longkuan, was waiting for his uncle and boss. Seeing his uncle like this, he couldn't help but open the car door and muttered, It's better not to come this time. The Zhang family has power and influence in the capital. Why should we be afraid of a rich businessman who came from nowhere? Shut up. Director Zhang was afraid that someone would hear him, so he looked around and breathed a sigh of relief. Don't say anything bad about Mr. Bailey in the future. He is not just a rich businessman. Remember, this person not only controls the lifeline of the Zhang family, but also can buy all the properties of other families. I met him in the UK. If I'm not wrong, he should have the blood of the British royal family. Chung Longkuan didn't believe it. I've also seen Mr. Bailey. Although I didn't see him clearly from a distance, his hair is silver gray, but his facial features are Asian, aren't they? How can he have the blood of the British royal family? You don't understand at all. The older the royal family is, the more Asian blood will be mixed with it. Director Zhang pinched his tired eyebrows. These are not important. What's important is your attitude. Don't be disrespectful to Mr. Bailey anymore. Otherwise, you will kill our whole family. Seeing that his uncle was so serious, Chung Longquan was a little afraid in his heart. He didn't speak again, turned the steering wheel, and left this seemingly unfathomable villa. Baligaju stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, shaking the goblet filled with red liquid with his fingertips, and looked away with a mocking expression. Master, a cloud of black fog gushed out from the depths of the villa, and then slowly turned into a human shape. The aura of the little master seems to be covered by something. I can't find it no matter how I search. Baligaju was much more relieved about a certain little ghost. He looked up at the clock hanging on the wall. Soon, he will be hungry. What do you think will happen to the people who abducted him? The black shadow lowered his eyes. To be honest, he really didn't dare to think about that. The train set off from the west of Beijing and would reach the first stop in 10 minutes. This stop was a small city. The good thing was that it was located in Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei, and the traffic was developed. In addition, the security checks in small cities were more lax. Therefore, the human traffickers had already discussed that they would get off at this stop and then act separately. There were always many people on ordinary trains. Sometimes there would even be luggage piled up in the passage, and some people would play poker on the train. At this time, basically no one would be sleeping. The human traffickers still let the two little people sit in the same seat, the innermost seat. Behind them was a female university student. The female university student seemed to like children very much. In addition, Bailey Shangxie and Helian Qingxin's appearance was too eye-catching, and people couldn't help but look back when they saw them. However, there was one thing that made her feel very regretful. The two little people fell asleep as soon as they got on the train, and until now, they hadn't woken up. She wanted to tease them with delicious food, but she couldn't do it. At this time, the human traffickers were also hungry. Only one person was left to watch over them. The others went to the toilet and prepared to get off the train. Originally, everything was going smoothly, including when they got off the train and checked in. However, it was different outside the station. This difference was all because Bailey Shangxie had woken up. Chapter 884. Darkness was approaching, and the Devil's Carnival was about to begin. The human traffickers did not know how dangerous the child was with them. Now, they only wanted to find a small hotel that did not require identification, order takeout, have a good meal, rest, feed the two good some medicine, and then split up. However, they did not expect that as soon as they entered the room, the woman who was holding Bailey Shangxie suddenly seemed to be possessed. Her face was covered with a black fog, and it seemed to be sinking into her body inch by inch. Ah! The soul-wrenching pain caused the woman to throw Bailey Shangxie out of her hand. She stared at the child without blinking, as if she wanted to say something, but it was too late. The black fog had invaded her eyes and completely sucked away all of her life force. There was no sign of her death. In the next second, she was lying on the ground. Bailey Shangxie was standing right in front of her. As he had just woken up, his short black hair was still standing up straight. His expression was very cool. He licked his thin lips cruelly and bloodthirstily. Then he sneered, as if he was disgusted by the taste of something. The woman's painful cry attracted everyone's attention, and the human traffickers did not notice the strangeness of Bailey Shangxie at all. Little Qin Chun, on the other hand, was awakened by the commotion. He reached out his little hand and rubbed his big eyes. Then he turned his head and looked at Bailey Shangxie, who was also a child. His little eyebrows furrowed. He finally knew what the other party was, a demon that fed on souls. However, she had never seen a devil of the same age as her. Under normal circumstances, devils would not appear. They were like the bloodlings, and after so many years of settling, they had perfectly infiltrated into the lives of humans. It could even be said that they were more extravagant than humans, because most of them were nobles from various countries. The more elegant they were, the more it suited their temperament. It was said that the only thing a devil pursued in life was aesthetics. They would even eat with a smile on their face, and no one would feel that they were rude. Bailey Shangxie in front of her was the same, which made little Qin Chun feel very strange when she saw him. She wanted to take him home and raise him. But she did not know if Beauty Wei Wei would agree to let him keep a little devil by his side. She should, right? Little Qing Chen rubbed her little face again. Her actions were like a little squirrel, always a little dazed after waking up. She blinked her big eyes a few times before she reacted. Now was not the time to consider the problem of raising a devil, but to stop this non-human devil from continuing. She stretched out her little hand and held Bailey Shanxia's wrist. Her little head shook twice, and her expression was very cute. Bailey Shanxia was not full yet, but when he saw that his underling had woken up, he took the time to show some concern. "Where did you buy that piece of chocolate cake that you ate?" It would have been fine if the other party did not mention the chocolate cake, but when he mentioned Qing Chen, he was even more determined to not let this group of human traffickers die. However, this did not affect his conversation with the little devil who looked only a little older than him. "I didn't buy the chocolate cake. My mother made it for me." Oh! Bailey Shanxia had been in the modern world for a while, but he had never wanted to find his mother as much as he did now, especially when he heard that the chocolate cake was made by his mother. This feeling became even stronger, to the point that the little devil looked a little lonely. Of course, Bailey Shanxia's way of expressing his loneliness was very different. He raised his eyelids, squinted his big red eyes, and walked directly to another man, looking like he was about to start the next round of eating. Little Qing Chen quickly blocked in front of him and whispered in his ear with a small voice, looking very cute, "We have to keep them alive so that we can eliminate their leader." With little Qing Chen's reminder, Bailey Shanxia remembered that half of the chocolate cake that he did not get. His eyes were full of hostility, and his voice was very cool. "Got it." Indeed, he had to keep them alive, but this one would not be kept alive for long. Under such circumstances, the human traffickers did not have the extra energy to care about what the two little people were talking about. They were now scared out of their wits. The scene just now seemed to have exceeded their understanding of things. The big man trembled as he stretched out his hand, wanting to check if the woman on the ground was still breathing. The other woman immediately pulled his hand back. "Don't touch. It's not clean. There must be something dirty in this small hotel. It must be so." She spoke with a hoarse voice. If she was not scared to a certain extent, she would not be like this. The man in the blue shirt also had cold sweat on his forehead, but it was obvious that he was different from the other two traffickers and had received professional training. He roared in a low voice, "Calm down." There was already someone knocking on the wall next door, probably because they thought that they were too noisy. In the past, when doing missions, such a situation had never happened. If someone suddenly died in the middle of a mission, it would be a serious problem for their work. The man thought, and reached out to massage his forehead, as if he had a headache. The woman was still trembling. She could not wait to leave this place. She thought that there was an evil spirit in the small hotel, and did not think about the two little people. However, the man's eyes were on Bailey Shanxia and Helian Qing Chen, and there was a questioning look in his eyes. Why are these two little brats so obedient? During this period of time, he had abducted many children, and every child would cry desperately after waking up for the first time. There was never a moment of silence. At this time, the children were most likely to be exposed and arouse suspicion, so they chose to come to the small hotel at this time to rest instead of sitting on the train. When they were tired from crying for a while, they would be hungry and tired and would not make a fuss anymore. This was the usual method of the traffickers. He had already prepared a cotton cloth to gag the two little brats. After all, the scene in the kindergarten made him feel a little uncomfortable. Unexpectedly, they were the quietest. Looking carefully, their little faces were a little pale, and he did not know why. "They must be scared," the woman mumbled, her voice trembling. "Children are psychic. They can see dirty things that others can't. This hotel is definitely problematic." At this time, the man sneered. "So what if there are dirty things? Don't forget who is behind us. I have already told you, this is a big deal, and it is done by the master. What are you afraid of? It's just a little evil. Everything will be fine when you see the master. It's good if there are dirty things. It can make these two little brats quiet." The woman did not expect that her colleague would be so bold. She opened her mouth and wanted to say something. The man waved his hand and said, "Okay, you don't have to shout anymore." Drag the person on the ground to hide under the bed. Get ready, we will leave. There are still 4 hours before checkout. 4 hours later, someone will come and knock on the door. This small hotel will not find anything for the time being. We can't continue to stay here. According to the original plan, you and Xiao Wang will go in one line, and I will go in one line. We will send these two goods separately. When Bailey Shangxie heard that the other party wanted to separate him and his underling, his red eyes were filled with a cold light. It should be known that the current little Qingchun was countless pieces of chocolate cake to Bailey Shangxie. It was fine that the other party had knocked away half of the chocolate cake, but now they dared to take away all the chocolate cake that he was going to eat in the future. Bailey Shangxie sneered in his heart. The light above his head seemed to have sensed something, and it made a buzzing sound. The woman and the burly man were already very scared. Now that they saw the situation in the room, they widened their eyes in horror. However, before they could scream, the entire room was plunged into darkness. In just a moment, the woman only felt a cold wind flash past her. It was so dark in front of her that she could not even see her fingers. She fell to the ground at once, and her voice was filled with fear. It's haunted. It's really haunted. What do you mean by haunted? It tripped. The man in the blue shirt reacted quickly. He picked up the phone and shone it to the side, and then pushed the door open. The light in the room was finally restored. The woman secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Just as she was about to stand up, she found that the burly man beside her was lying on the ground stiffly. He looked exactly like the woman who was tricked when they entered the room. The woman could no longer hold back the fear in her heart. She reached out and grabbed the man's sleeve. We can't stay here. We really can't stay here anymore. We'll take the 2 children and leave immediately. Anyway, we're going to the same place, so we might as well take the same train. No matter what, we have to leave here. If you don't leave now, I'll leave by myself. What are you panicking for? Even though the man said that, his back was drenched in sweat. This small hotel was indeed abnormal, and they had to disguise themselves as a couple to avoid any mistakes. The other party was not very experienced in abduction, so it was best for them to leave together. With that in mind, he pushed the big man under the bed as well, and his voice became anxious. We'll take the same train. You carry one child, and I'll carry the other. Let's go immediately. Of course, the woman couldn't wait to check out. She didn't even say anything and bent down to pick up little Qingchun. Little Qingchun was very cooperative. She looked sideways at Bailey Shangxie, who was also picked up by the man, and the desire to raise a little devil became stronger. Her little hand involuntarily reached out and touched Bailey Shangxie's head. Chapter 885. Bailey Shangxie's short hair was very stiff and hard to the touch. He had never had his head touched before. He looked up at little Qingchun and licked his thin lips with the tip of his tongue, as if he had just eaten something. However, this bit of food was not enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. However, he was not in a hurry to kill everyone. Compared to killing people directly, demons like to see the fear of humans on the verge of collapse the most before they died. Just like now, Bailey Shangxie looked at the woman's trembling back and felt very amused. However, he was still very hungry. The woman felt a chill on her back. She turned around and looked behind her, but did not find anything. The man in the blue shirt was making a call. The person on the other end seemed to have been transferred to the person he was looking for. When the man heard that the call was connected, he immediately lowered his voice and said hurriedly, "Master, we seem to have encountered something dirty. 2 people died inexplicably." Dirty? The person on the other end narrowed his eyes and did not seem to care. "We'll talk about it when you come back. What about the goods? Are they okay?" The man seemed to be very respectful to this master and replied respectfully, "The goods are fine. I'm just afraid that the hotel will find out something when the time comes. It's just a small hotel. If the bodies are hidden well, they won't be found for 10 days or half a month. Don't worry, there are no surveillance cameras in the small hotel, and there is no identity registration. Even if people die, it won't be blamed on you. The most important thing is to keep the goods safe and send them back quickly. If you encounter any strange things, just stick the yellow talisman I gave you. It will suppress the soul and exorcise the evil." When the man heard this, his eyes lit up. He hung up the phone and asked the woman to take out the yellow talisman from his backpack. Seeing that the yellow talisman was protecting him, the woman's hand that was holding little Qingxun relaxed a lot. She smiled. With the master's yellow talisman, any evil spirit will only walk into the trap. Little Qingxun glanced at the yellow talisman and silently stroked Bailey Shanxia's head. Bailey Shanxia's direction was not very good. He stopped little Qingxun's actions and maintained a cool expression throughout the whole process. In his heart, he was thinking that if he touched her, he would ask her to compensate him with a piece of chocolate cake. Anyway, he would not let anyone touch him for nothing. There weren't that many people at the train station at night. In addition, this was a small city, so there were relatively fewer people entering the station. The two human traffickers had been so busy that they had not eaten anything. Furthermore, someone had died in the small hotel. Even if they were inhumane, they would not be in a good mood. Their entire body was indescribably weak, and they only wanted to drink some hot soup to warm their bodies. Therefore, the woman stayed behind to monitor the two little ones. The man took out his wallet and planned to buy 2 bowls of instant noodles and eat them with hot water. They had changed the train schedule at the last minute. Although there were no more seats, the train would depart 3 hours earlier than the previous one. There was still half an hour before it would depart. They could take advantage of this time to rest in the waiting hall. The woman was really mentally exhausted. If it were not for the yellow talisman, she would probably have broken down. The place that sold instant noodles was in the waiting hall, but the place where they needed to get hot water was a little far away. The man asked the woman to feed the 2 little ones some medicine. He did not have to let them fall asleep. It was good that they were listless like now. The woman responded with her mouth, but her hands did not move for a long time. Looking at the back of the man's departing figure, she reached out and rubbed her face. They had abducted and sold so many children, but none of them had been as embarrassed as they were today. Speaking of which, this woman had not received much education. In fact, she also had children. However, blinded by greed, she only had her own children in her eyes. She knew that abductors could make money quickly. She had done all kinds of heartless things and had never felt guilty. As long as she could live a good life, she did not care what others did. She had been interrogated by the police before, but so what? The police were very efficient. The abductors were very familiar with the police's efficiency. They insisted that they did not do it, and everything was peaceful. She did not think that she was guilty, nor did she think that the dirty things in the hotel were retribution for them. She just felt that they were unlucky to have entered a small hotel that they should not have entered. Moreover, these 2 little ones, one of them had red eyes. It was not easy to make a move on them. The woman had a fickle temper, coupled with her experience. When she looked at little Qingxun and Bailey Shangxia, it was inevitable that her expression would be a little ugly. Some human traffickers would often secretly vent their anger on the children after abducting them. This woman was such a human trafficker. She reached out her hand and wanted to slap little Qingxun. Anyway, when the child cried, people would only think that she was disciplining the child for being disobedient. The 2 little ones were leaning their heads against each other, curiously looking at the scene in the train station. Qingxun's stomach was also hungry and was growling. She did not expect that the woman would make a move. However, before her palm could land on her back, her entire body was pulled over by a small wrist. That small finger was as white and beautiful as his father's. "I wanted to play with you more, but you humans are so stupid. Not only do you have a death wish, but you also want to touch my chocolate cake time and time again." Qingxun, who was treated like a chocolate cake, was speechless. "Anyway, if you die, someone else will take us there." Thinking of this, Bailey Shangxia did not need to hide anymore. His eyes emitted a unique light that was unique to demons. The woman stared at this scene with her eyes wide open. Her heart surged with unprecedented regret. She wanted to scream, but she found that her throat seemed to be blocked by something. She could not make a sound. She had always thought that the dirty things were in the hotel. She never thought that there would be any problem with the child they abducted. When she saw the bloodthirsty, evil smile on that handsome little face, her scalp went numb. What kind of thing did they abduct? The woman did not have time to move. She could not even shake off that porcelain white hand. She was engulfed by a black fog from head to toe. That kind of pain was almost imprinted on her soul. She opened her mouth, and the next moment, she sat back in her seat. Her neck stiffly drooped, as if she had fallen asleep. However, little Qinchin knew that she was not asleep. Her soul was eaten by Bailey Shanxia. Speaking of which, he seemed to have a big appetite. Little Qinchin turned her head to look at Bailey Shanxia. Bailey Shanxia licked his thin lips and said in a cool voice, "What are you looking at?" "Eating too much is not good for digestion," little Qinchin said as she rubbed her little belly. She looked up at Bailey Shanxia and said, "I'm hungry too." Little Bailey Shanxia had no experience in taking care of humans. With a cool expression, he jumped down from the seat and opened the small bag that the woman carried with her. He took out all the cash that he could use and said in a domineering manner, "I'll buy you some food when we get on the train." "Okay." Qinchin nodded. She thought for a moment and added, "I'm not chocolate cake." Bailey Shanxia refuted seriously, "You are. Others are ham, but you are chocolate cake. I can smell milk on you. Don't underestimate the demon's sense of smell." "Qinchin, Beauty Wei Wei, the little demon is a big foodie. What should I do?" Bailey Shanxia's small figure stood there, stuffing all the money in his hands into the pockets of little Qinchin, who was sitting on the chair. From afar, he looked like a little brother with his cool and arrogant demeanor. When little Qinchin saw that he had given all the money to her, she lowered her head and patted her little pocket. She said, "If you want to treat me to chocolate cake, I'll ask Beauty Wei Wei to make it for you when we get back." After all, if he wanted to raise a little demon, he had to find a way to abduct her to his home. Bailey Shanxia did not refuse. He nodded and carried Qinchin, who was half a head shorter than him, up from the seat and moved her to another position. He was only that big, so he looked clumsy when he carried a little Qinchin who was about the same size as him. No matter how strong he was, he looked clumsy. However, the people waiting for the train not far away felt that this scene was very cute. In addition, the two children were very good-looking, so it was naturally eye-catching. They're brothers, right? Nonsense, of course they're brothers. The older brother is so handsome. His nose is straight, and his skin is so white that it looks like it's painted. And his eyes are big and bright. He's a foreigner, right? His eyes are dark red. He's probably a mixed race. Look at his black hair. A mixed race is more handsome. When the man came back with the bowl of instant noodles, he heard these words. He narrowed his eyes and hurriedly walked through the crowd. When he saw that the two children were not shouting or crying, and that the woman was sitting opposite them, he breathed a sigh of relief. But why did the woman dare to sleep at this time? The man was displeased. He touched the woman's head with one of the bowls of instant noodles and said in a low voice, "What's going on? Wake up." The woman did not move at all. Not only that, but she also fell to the side when the man touched her. Fortunately, her friend was sitting next to her. Otherwise, he would definitely have noticed the woman's suspicion. The man was the closest to his companion. When he saw the woman's abnormal expression, he immediately understood what had happened. The answer was coming. He tried his best to control his emotions so that he would not throw the bowl of instant noodles in his hand away. This was because he knew that if he made a loud noise now, it would definitely attract attention. Therefore, he had to endure it. He first put the bowl of instant noodles aside, then stretched out his trembling right hand to help the woman back to her original position. That way, it would look like she was just asleep and not breathing. After doing all this, the man turned around to look at Bailey Shanxia and the others. He planned to feed the rest of the medicine to the two children. Then, no matter who he carried, he would get on the train first. However, when he bent down, he saw a small bag under the feet of the two children. This bag was clearly carried by the woman. How did it get under their feet? Chapter 886. Suddenly, the way the man looked at Bailey Shanxia and Hellion Qinchin completely changed. He felt strange from the beginning, and that strange feeling was indescribable. These two little brats were too quiet, and they had not cried from the beginning to the end. Even when they were in kindergarten, one of them even brought him to see the police. If he had not reacted fast enough, he would have been caught by now. How could a 3-year-old child be so smart? When he was 3 years old, if someone gave him a piece of candy, he would probably follow that person. Would he know how to set a trap for others? This was simply a fantasy story. Originally, everything was going smoothly today, but ever since they met these two brats, more and more trouble began to appear. 3 people, a total of 3 people had already died, but these two brats did not even make a fuss. People died for no reason. Were they not afraid? Even if they were not afraid, which child would be in the mood to take the money in the bag at this time? Strange. All of this was too strange. For some reason, the man felt that the 2 children in front of him made him feel very oppressed, especially the child they did not want to kidnap. That pair of fiery red eyes was just like a demon. That's right. It was the kind of evil, elegant, and murderous demon that walked out of asshole. The man trembled. Whether it was his illusion or not, he did not want to do this business anymore. Without hesitation, the man took the wallet in his hand and turned to leave. It just so happened that the train he was going to take had started to check in. Even if he walked very quickly, it would not be strange. Moreover, as long as it was a train station, there would never be a lack of people checking in, no matter how small the city was. Bailey Shanxia looked at the back of the man who blended into the crowd in the blink of an eye. His small brows furrowed, and then he laughed coldly. Want to escape? Ha! No human could escape from the palm of his hand. What's more, he still had to follow this little white mouse to find the person behind it. He had promised that he would finish everything in one fell swoop. Little Qin-chun had the same idea, so before Bailey Shanxia could say anything, he jumped down from his seat. He was still a little shaky when he walked, but he didn't forget to hold Bailey Shanxia's hand. He took small steps forward and said in a serious tone, "I know which train he's taking. We'll get on with him." Little Qin-chun had a photographic memory since he was young. When the human traffickers were holding the train tickets, he had already scanned the information on them. Not only did he remember the train schedule, he even remembered the carriage and seat number of the human traffickers. It was just a little troublesome to go through the security check. Little Qin-chun raised her head and tried to jump up, but she couldn't see anything in front of her. When Bailey Shanxia saw that he was struggling to jump, he immediately reached out and carried the little one up. However, it was useless. The two of them added together were not even as tall as a high school student. It seems that I can only freeload. Little Qin-chun finished talking to himself and continued to hold Bailey Shanxia's hand. Like leading his little child, they stood in front of the two couples. The couple had already noticed them. Just now, they saw the older brother carrying the younger brother and even put the younger brother on the seat, asking him to sit properly. It was so cute. Now that the two little ones were standing in front of them, they couldn't help but stroke the head of the younger one. Little Qin-chun knew that his plan had succeeded. He raised his head and smiled at the girl who was stroking his head. Just like that, they entered the station together with the crowd. No one would check the two children's tickets. Everyone thought that they were brought in by the adults behind them. After all, their height was not enough to buy a half-price ticket, especially one of them, who was running unsteadily and kept swaying back and forth. Bailey Shanxia was afraid that he would run too fast and fall, so he lowered his head and held him down. He lowered his eyes and rolled up little Qin-chun's long sleeves. So loving. This is the most loving brother I have ever seen. He even rolled up his sleeves. I wonder if he knows how to tie the baby's shoelaces? It's so cute. Little Qin-chun didn't think much of it. When Bailey Shanxia asked him to lift his left hand, he lifted his left hand. When he asked him to lift his right hand, he lifted his right hand. Her big round eyes were looking at the train. No one knew what she was looking at. Her hair was messy, and a few strands of her ahogue were looking at her from the top of her head. She looked very fluffy, and she looked very obedient. After he finished rolling up his sleeves, he stretched out his left hand and poked the palm of his right hand. The onlookers couldn't help but want to hold him in their arms and give him a good rub. After that, little Qin-chun's actions didn't seem so clumsy. However, Bailey Shanxia still planned to hold his hand. "Give me your hand. We'll walk hand in hand. Don't worry, the train won't leave." With him around, the train would only leave when he wanted it to. Little Qin-chun was also obedient. He passed his hand over to her, and the two little ones held each other's hands again. They walked forward one small step at a time. Everything was fine at first. When they entered the carriage, Bailey Shanxia couldn't walk anymore. He looked at the countless people in front of him and licked the tip of his tongue. There's so much food. Little Chin-chun was speechless. You can't eat. I'll buy you a bento box later. It's shown on TV that there are bento boxes on the train. Little Chin-chun sternly stopped Bailey Shangxia. It was also his first time taking a train. Usually, he would take a plane, so he had never had such an experience. However, standing in the middle of a group of food, he had to be patient. Bailey Shangxia looked to the left and then to the right. He was very restless. When I ate people just now, you didn't say anything. That's different. That's a human trafficker. You can eat as much as you want. Bailey Shangxia stood there and didn't leave. Little Chin-chun could only pull him hard. Bailey Shangxia was very puzzled. They're all ham sausages. What's the difference? Only you would treat humans as ham sausages. Little Chin-chun was very helpless. The people here are all ordinary people. You can't hurt them. Why? His father didn't tell him what he couldn't eat. All right, he couldn't eat dirty things. This was the standard etiquette of the demons. However, the people he saw just now were very fresh and didn't smell bad. Why couldn't he eat them? Because they didn't do anything wrong. If you kill them, it's equivalent to committing a crime. When the time comes, Little Chin-chun suddenly paused. Like a little adult, he held his forehead and said, "Why should I argue with you about this?" This non-human guy obviously didn't have a sense of good and evil. In his eyes, there was no difference between human traffickers and ordinary people. They were all ham sausages. The only difference was the brand. "I'm hungry." Bailey Shangxia was very cool. He only gave Little Chin-chun 3 words. He narrowed his eyes in dissatisfaction and planned to attack the nearest human. Little Chin-chun immediately pulled him back and ran to the front of the train attendant who was selling snacks. He raised his small face and said in a childish voice, "Sister, do you have chocolate? I want to buy a piece." It was rare for such a young child to buy things by himself. The train attendant was stunned at first, then smiled and said, "Oh, we do. It's for Dove. 1 piece is 10 yuan. I want 2 yuan. Little Chin-chun rummaged through his pocket and fished out a 50 yuan note. He then handed it over with his small hand. Bailey Shangxia had already lost interest in the ham sausages that could be eaten at any time after hearing about the chocolate. He looked at the chocolate in Little Chin-chun's hand with bright eyes. Little Chin-chun wasn't very good at opening the packaging of jades. He held the money in his small hand, and after a long time, he still couldn't open the packaging. Bailey Shangxia found an empty seat and carried Little Chin-chun to sit on it. Then he opened the 2 pieces of chocolate. He took 1 piece and fed the other to Little Chin-chun. When he was almost halfway through, Bailey Shangxia remembered that human anatomy was different from his. He put away Little Chin-chun's piece and said seriously, "Children can't eat too much chocolate." When the people around him heard this, they burst out laughing. This brother is so interesting. He's still a child. Little Chin-chun actually still wanted to eat, but he knew that if he continued to eat, his teeth would definitely hurt. He endured the pain and looked at the half piece of chocolate again. Bailey Shangxia opened his mouth and ate the rest of the chocolate. His voice was still cool. "Let's go find that man." "Okay." Little Chin-chun patted his small pocket and walked behind Bailey Shangxia shakily. At this time, the train had already left for 10 minutes. The human trafficker didn't expect Bailey Shangxia and Little Chin-chun to follow him onto the train. He thought that the matter was solved. He leaned against the carriage and rubbed his head. Then, he lit a cigarette and took 2 deep puffs. Unlike planes and high-speed trains, smoking was allowed on the express train. In the pantry of the carriage, people often gathered together to smoke. The human trafficker didn't buy a ticket. After so many things happened 3 times in a row, he planned to take the bus directly to Yungue district after getting off the train this time. Then, he would change to the train that they were going to do the transaction. Without a child, taking the bus was the safest way to avoid detection. It was easy to deal with the hotel, but the woman who died at the waiting station of the train would definitely be found within a day. After this transaction, he would directly leave the border from Yunnan. Otherwise, he couldn't guarantee that he would be in danger. When he thought of this, the human trafficker punched the side of the carriage. Fortunately, he was in the bathroom. He raised his head and looked at himself in the mirror. He washed his face with cold water and dialed a number. Master, another person died. Goods? I didn't bring the goods. I have a feeling that these two brats are too strange. They're not normal at all. Yes, I'm on the train now. I'll be there in 3 hours. The other goods are still here. I'll ask someone to bring them to the train when the time comes. Chapter 887. Outside the train, in a small hotel in B City that was left behind. Only a bang was heard. Young L directly kicked open the door in front of him, and his eyes were cold and bright. Hey, who the hell are you? How dare you break in so casually? If you don't go out, I will call the police. Do you hear me? Hellion Vivian glanced sideways at the owner of the small hotel and smiled softly. Letting people stay in the hotel without making an ID record. If such behavior is reported to the police, what do you think the consequences will be? The owner's face changed, and he didn't make any more noise. Hellion Vivian reached out and pushed him away. She walked into the room, reached out and touched the cup on the coffee table, and then walked to the bathroom. She didn't see anything, and then walked out of the bathroom and set her eyes on the big bed in the room. That bed was different from a regular hotel, and the bottom looked empty. Logically speaking, the other party shouldn't have left so soon. The ticket they checked was obviously 3 hours later. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes and walked over. Suddenly, the tip of her nose moved. What is this smell? The smell of meat from a human body? Without any hesitation, Hellion Wei bent over and lifted up the bed sheet, peeking inside. Before she said anything, the owner of the hotel shouted, and his voice trembled. What is that? Didn't you see it? 2 corpses just died not long ago. Hellion Vivian raised her eyelids. Originally, she wanted to summon the souls of the other party to ask some questions. Who knew that these 2 people didn't even have a single soul? Not to mention them, even the small hotel was very clean, and there wasn't a single wandering soul. This situation was abnormal. Although there were many people in the train station, it was the place with the strongest yang energy. But most of the train stations were built in the wind, so that there would be yin energy around. Especially a small hotel like this. The people who came here didn't understand, and it was the favorite place for wandering souls to absorb resentment. How could there be no dead spirits? Hellion Vivian frowned and slid open the screen of the mobile phone. Monkey, invade the train system of B City and input all the IDs of the 4 people here. See if 2 of them changed their tickets temporarily. The innkeeper was not as calm. His face was still covered in cold sweat. What should I do? How could they die? Did they eat something they shouldn't eat? Or did they take drugs? None of them. Unnatural deaths. If I were you, I wouldn't be standing here. I would call the police immediately. Hellion Vivian said as she walked out. Since the person was dead, there were no more meaningful clues here. The innkeeper's eyes widened. Who are you? When he suddenly barged in, he found a dead person in the room. Such a thing had never happened to him before. Hellion Wei didn't answer him again. The young man was even more taciturn. He wore a pair of high-heeled black boots and clattered out of the hotel. His entire body was clad in black. That outfit made him look like a special forces soldier that could only be seen in movies. Boss, I found it. Hellion Vivian didn't hang up the phone. Monkey held the mouse with one hand and said to Hellion Vivian with bright eyes, there are indeed 2 people who changed their tickets temporarily. The train number will be sent to your mobile phone. Other organizations have also sent us news. So far, the trafficking leaders in the mainland are concentrated in Yungui district. This time, their transaction location is different from the past. They will deliver the goods on a train. I will also send you the specific information of this train. Okay. Hellion Vivian hung up the phone and rode on the tomahawk. Now, she could confirm that the person who changed the tickets at the last minute was the human trafficker they were looking for. L, you don't have to follow me. Inform all the brothers to gather at the train that Monkey mentioned. Remember, this is the mainland. When you bring your equipment on board, remember to dismantle them. As she spoke, Hellion Vivian pressed her helmet and smiled. You guys go to the car and wait for them. Qin and I will be there soon. Elle knew that Boss was going to play big this time. She even mentioned the equipment. She definitely didn't intend to let the other party go. Scold Olde, did you hear what Boss said? Elle pressed his Bluetooth headset. The 5 sports cars on the highway changed directions and were divided into 5 images. Each image was very handsome. Roger, gather in Yunnan. Swoosh! The beautiful body of the BMW Tomahawk drew a bright light in the darkness. On the train, the man in the blue shirt was still sleeping on the carriage until his mobile phone rang. Then, he lowered his head and quickly pressed the call button. Master? Listen, there are a few organizations looking for us now. Be careful when you move. Don't reveal your whereabouts. The person on the phone wasn't Master, but the boss he used to follow. When the human trafficker heard that there were organizations looking for him, his scalp went numb. Boss, how did this happen? We have always minded our own business with these organizations. How the fuck would I know? The boss's voice sounded like he was about to break down. It's not just the mainland. The entire Asian organization has been mobilized. This has never happened before. However, don't panic. After all, this is our territory. And don't forget, the more powerful the organization is, the more they won't dare to mess around in the mainland. This is the Tang sect's territory. They have to be careful. The human trafficker didn't relax. But boss, didn't you say before that our business must not be discovered by the Tang sect? Once they find out, the Tang sect will definitely not let us go. Don't worry. The Tang sect won't make a move for such a small matter. Moreover, with Master around, many things can be covered up. We are absolutely safe with Master. The boss didn't know if he was comforting himself or the human trafficker. However, the human trafficker was very happy to hear that. As long as Master's yellow talisman was around, he wouldn't be exposed. Master had already cast a spell on them. It wouldn't be that easy for those people to find him. However, he didn't know that while he was answering the phone, 2 little people in the carriage not far away had been observing him for a long time. Qingqin's gaze was on his phone. Bailey Shangxie didn't think so. In fact, the type of soul he liked to eat the most was this kind of soul that was soaked in darkness. It would be best if there was some resentment in it. Then, the taste would be different. Moreover, he could tell that this man must have been cast a spell on by someone. It should be good to eat. Thinking of this, Bailey Shangxie stuck out the tip of his tongue and licked his thin lips. Qingqin turned around and said to him, I forgot to call Beauty Wei Wei. It's already 11 o'clock. I'm not back so late. She must be worried. Bailey Shangxie didn't think much of it. Usually, he would jump to another city while eating. If he didn't return home for 3 days and 3 nights, his father wouldn't look for him. For Bailey Shangxie, this was a very normal thing. I'm going to borrow a phone to call Beauty Wei Wei. Little Qingqin bit his thumb and pattered over to the flight attendant. With a serious expression on his face, he asked, Sister, can I borrow your phone to call my mother? Qingqin looked so cute that the flight attendant's heart was about to melt. Little friend, are you lost? Your mother is sitting there. Sister will help you broadcast and ask her to come find you. Okay? My mother isn't on the train. Only Grandma is. But Grandma is asleep. I don't want to wake her up, so I came to ask Sister to borrow a phone to call my mother. As Qingqin spoke, she tried to tiptoe and pointed at the old woman who was sleeping soundly not far away. Seeing that she couldn't even stand properly, the flight attendant immediately handed the phone to her. Here, take it and make the call. Thank you, Sister. Qingqin held the phone in her small hand and pattered over to Bailey Shangxie. Her white and tender little finger tapped the number on the screen again and again. After the number was dialed, she raised the phone to her ear. Bailey Shangxie saw that she was struggling to hold the big phone, so he freed one hand to help Qingqin press it. Hellion Vivian, who was riding the Tomahawk to the final destination of the train, heard her earpiece ring. She picked it up without looking at the number. The sound of the wind was all around her. Hello? Beauty Wei Wei, it's me. Little Qingqin was very happy. He was afraid that Beauty Wei Wei wouldn't pick up when she saw an unknown number. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and stopped the Tomahawk by the roadside. Where are you? I'm on the train. Little Qingqin was so happy that he didn't even hold the phone. Instead, he let Bailey Shangxie hold it for him and pressed his little face against it. I'm with a friend I just met. Hellion Vivian's thin lips curved. Train K1117? Yes. Little Qingqin nodded. I saw a bad guy at the school gate, so I followed him. Hellion Vivian. So you were willing to be kidnapped from the start. Have you eaten? Hellion Vivian still felt sorry for her son. Little Ching-chun moved again. Yes, I ate chocolate with a friend I just met. Hellion Vivian laughed. Do you want to lose all your teeth? Who's the phone? The human traffickers? No. The human trafficker was scared by the friend he just met and ran onto the train. We followed him, and then I borrowed a phone from the stewardess. Although Little Ching-chun's voice was very cute, the rules were very clear. Soon, Hellion Vivian noticed that his son kept talking about the friend he just met. Ching-chun, are you hiding something from me? Chapter 888. Upon hearing this, Little Ching-chun's big round eyes darted around. He subconsciously looked at Bailey Shangxie, who was holding the phone in his hand. Then, he turned his head and held the phone. He lowered his voice and said, Pretty Wei Wei, can I raise a little devil? The very obedient kind. Demon? Obedient? Obedient? After Hellion Wei chuckled twice. She instantly thought of the two soulless corpses in the small hotel. Her eyes suddenly narrowed. That new friend of yours is a demon? Little Ching-chun knew that he couldn't hide it. So he simply nodded his little head. Yes, he said that he likes to eat the chocolate cake you make. After we're done here, can we bring him home? After hearing the words, chocolate cake, Bailey Shangxia's cool little face finally showed some expression. He also leaned over and put his ear to the phone screen. You could bring him home, but let's meet outside first. Hellion Vivian rode on the tomahawk and tilted his head to look at the side of the track. In the distance, he could still see the tail of the train turning into the tunnel. I'm going the same direction as you. The trafficker will change trains halfway. After you get off the train, wait at the door. I will pick you up and watch your little demon. Don't let him eat people casually on the train. Understand? Understood. Ching-chun hung up the phone and looked up at Bailey Shangxie. Beauty Wei Wei is also here. She must have found the nest of the bad guys and wants to come with us to get rid of them. Bailey Shangxia's scarlet eyes paused. How does she know our route? She found out after checking. Ching-chun said very casually. Bailey Shangxie glanced at him and thought to himself, Don't bully me because I'm not educated. When did humans become so efficient? Besides, it's impossible for others to find out the train information of others, let alone the route. After making the call, Ching-chun returned the phone to the flight attendant. However, she was still young. Normally, she should have washed up and gone to bed at this time. It was inevitable that she would feel sleepy now. She stretched out her small hand and rubbed her eyes. There was only one extra seat around them, and it was a temporary one. The next stop would be for passengers. Bailey Shangxie saw that he was sleepy, so he carried him and put him on the seat. He stood on the right side of Little Ching-chun to prevent others from touching him. Little Ching-chun rubbed her eyes and suddenly thought of something. Do you want to call the person in charge of you? Usually, little demons needed someone to control them before they could come to the human world. Otherwise, they would have been captured by the Grim Reaper of the underworld. Bailey Shangxie was very indifferent. No, my father doesn't have time to care about me. He still needs to find my mother. Father? Mother? Little Ching-chun felt that these two names sounded very familiar, as if she had heard them somewhere before. She shook her little head and couldn't remember. Then after we get rid of the bad guys, you can come back to my house with me first. Then, I'll ask Beauty Wei Wei to inform your father to pick you up. Okay. The two little people, one standing and one sitting, said a few words from time to time, until the little one fell asleep like a chicken eating rice. His head kept bumping into Bailey Shangxia's shoulder. Bailey Shangxie was afraid that he would hurt his little nose, so he just stood there without moving. He supported the little one with his shoulder and did not forget to hold Little Ching-chun's back with his hand. His expression did not change at all. His eyes were looking at the scenery outside the window. His small side profile was very cool. His thin lips seemed to be moving, but it was not obvious. When the train passed through the tunnel, his face was reflected in the window. Only then did she know that he was talking to someone. At this time, almost everyone in the train was asleep. No one noticed that many black crows had been circling the train since just now. Large clusters of black feathers fell from the front of the train, painting the whole way. That was a sign unique to the arrival of demons. Bailey Shangxie raised his little eyebrows. Father actually came and made such a big scene. That's enough. The black crow flapped its wings twice. Just like that, it stuck to the window of the train and called out in a low voice twice. Bailey Shangxia was afraid that it would wake little Qingqian up, so he reached out two small hands and covered little Qingqian's ears. Then he said in a low voice, "I know, after I'm done with this, I'll look for father. Go ahead and keep an eye on a person. I made a mark on him, so it's easy to find him. Watch him carefully. Don't let him run away." After hearing the order, the black crows left the window, but they still did not leave the train. They circled back and forth above the carriage as if they had found someone. That scene was very strange. When the train attendant saw that, she immediately sent a message to the train conductor. So many black crows, where did they come from? No one could answer their question. Even the train conductor's final answer was, probably when the train passed through the tunnel, it woke up the black crows. This is a very normal phenomenon. When they reach the next tunnel, they will probably leave. Even if they don't leave, it's fine. They just saw a glowing object, so they followed it all the way. Under normal circumstances, such an explanation was used to fool the crowd. Ordinary people did not know, but the train conductor knew very well. There were many trains passing through the tunnel, so when so many black crows appeared, something must have happened. However, unlike flying on land, as long as one was careful, one could deal with it. Therefore, everything seemed to be safe and sound. The people in the carriage who were not asleep were all leaning against the window to look outside. They had never seen so many black crows flying in groups. If it were not for the dark sky, many people would have raised their phones to take pictures. Such a shocking scene was really rare. At this time, the human trafficker woke up. His head was still leaning against the carriage door, and he looked outside through the window. It was hard not to notice the black crows flying past his eyes. And for some reason, he had a feeling that those black crows were staring at him. That's right, as if they were following someone's orders. They were staring at him. The human trafficker was frightened by his own thoughts. He shook his head and thought that it must be because too many things had happened today. So he had such an illusion, but he was still worried, especially when he saw the blood-red eyes of the black crows. He felt like he had been struck by lightning. He finally understood why those black crows gave him such a familiar feeling. The color of those eyes was obviously the color of the child who should not have been kidnapped. The strange feeling from before returned. The human trafficker smiled coldly, then took out the yellow talisman and hung it around his neck. Since he knew where the problem was, it was easy to deal with. When he got off the train, he would ask the master to clean up all these dirty things. Chapter 889. Soon, the train to the Yungue district arrived at the station. The trafficker was not in a hurry to get off the train. Instead, he looked at the black crows flying around outside and dialed a number with his mobile phone. "Boss, I'm being watched. No, not by the police, but by a group of dirty things. These dirty things are obviously trying to ruin our business. If they keep following me, I won't be able to bring the goods onto the train. Ask the master to give me some advice, and I'll wipe out this group of dirty things." The person on the other end of the phone hung up after hearing the situation. The person who was called the boss by the trafficker was a local tyrant in the Yungue district. People called him the Sixth Master. He was in the business of trafficking children and women all year round. It was reasonable to say that this kind of task of delivering goods by train would not have a big problem. Even if he exposed a flaw and was being watched, it was just a matter of breaking a line. However, this time he did not know what the problem was. Not only did the police investigate him closely, but they also alarmed various organizations and stopped many of his transactions. At first, he thought that he had offended someone. Now, when he heard that there were dirty things causing trouble, he could not take it anymore. He turned around and went to the meditation room on the second floor. If nothing important had happened, he would not have dared to disturb them. But now he could not bear it anymore. He reached out and pushed the door open. A woman in her 30s was sitting in the room. She was wearing clothes similar to an Indian kasaya and many Buddhist prayer beads around her neck. She was teaching a child how to read. Her side profile looked very gentle, but the child seemed to be very scared and did not learn a single word at all. The woman gripped the ballpoint pen in her hand tightly, as if she was enduring something. She took a breath and stood up from the wooden chair. She had a very exotic face, soft black hair that reached her waist, and a Buddhist aura in her eyes. She looked up at the sixth master and said in a neither cold nor warm voice, "What's the matter? Master, it's like this. Old Seven has encountered some problems. It seems that he has been targeted by some dirty things. These dirty things may ruin our plans. When the time comes, those children of single parents that you want..." Old Six's voice was somewhat probing, just hoping that she could help solve the problem. In the past, he had never believed that there were ghosts in this world, and he was not afraid of those things. It was not until he met such a person a few days ago that Old Sixth realized that there were some things in this world that could not be explained by common sense. For example, there were widely spread cases in the market that could make people follow you with a pat on the shoulder. The practical application was not the legendary secret medicine at all. A paper talisman could do it. There were also methods to kill people and tricks to raise ghosts. Every one of them was very powerful, although Old Six still didn't know the background of this master in front of him. With this woman's help, he was able to earn 3 times more than before. In the past, he was only in charge of selling goods. Those unorganized human traffickers who abducted children from all over the country would buy goods from him, and the cost in between was a large sum of money. Now he was a real organization. In just 1 month, the number of children shipped to the Yungue district had reached 5 digits. This master's temper was very strange. She did not take money, but only picked the children that she liked among the goods. However, these children would only stay with her for 3 days at most. After 3 days, no one knew where the children went, and no one dared to ask. Old Sixth could see that the reason why she came to him was because he was in this line of work. He wondered what the master had done to those children. She couldn't have eaten them, right? Old Sixth did not dare to think too much. He lowered his head respectfully. The woman glanced at him and said in a faint voice, "Where is he now?" "The train has arrived. It should be time to get off." Old Six took out his phone and said, "Why don't you talk to him?" The woman did not answer the phone. It seemed that all her thoughts were on the child. She picked up a ballpoint pen and said, "It's not necessary. The train station is a very easy place to set up a formation. You can ask him to take my talisman, bite his right hand, and draw a cross on the ground. It will be solved naturally. Just keep the phone connected. Put it on speaker. I can hear it." Old Six's eyes lit up when he saw that she was going to command personally. He immediately put it on speaker. Hearing the feedback from the other side of the phone, the human trafficker rubbed his hands and looked at Black Crow outside the window. His eyes flashed with excitement and killing intent. This group of ungrateful bastards. They could have gone to heaven, but they just had to come in front of him to court death. He smiled sinisterly, pulled the zipper of his coat tight, and walked out of the train in big strides. The master said that if we want to find a way, we have to find a place far away from the exit. At this time, in the carriage, little Ching Chun was still a little sleepy. He did not know that they had arrived at the station. He just felt that it was a little noisy. He stretched out his 2 little hands and rubbed his eyes. The ahog on his head was still staring blankly. Bailey Shangxia saw that he did not want to leave, so he carried him in a domineering manner. He carried little Ching Chun and walked forward slowly. He could not see the road ahead, so he could only tilt his head. His little face was very serious, as if he was completing a mission. When the people around saw the 2 little guys, they made way for them. Some even took out their phones to take a picture and posted it on Weibo. They said, "They are so cute. I want to take them home and raise them," and so on. Bailey Shangxia did not care about what others did. He just felt strange being surrounded by a bunch of ham sausages. If he lost his patience, he might just grab one of them and eat it. However, if he was carrying Lil Ching Chun, Bailey Shangxia could not free his hands. He played the role of a good brother throughout the journey. Perhaps even Bailey Shangxia did not know that when he was treating little Ching Chun, he had an unprecedented gentleness. When they got off the train, the black crows swarmed over and landed on the branches of the trees beside the tracks. There were so many birds that the staff could not chase them away no matter how hard they tried. They did not dare to chase them away. After all, black crows were not sparrows. This kind of situation was rare. If it was overseas, in a castle with good greenery, there would be a lot of black crows at night. However, in mainland Huaxia, such a scene had never happened before. Many black feathers fell on the tracks of the train station. The people who got out of the station looked back from time to time to see those black crows. Hellion Wei Wei was on the dirt road on the other side of the tracks. The performance of the BMW Tomahawk was already good. Coupled with Hellion Wei Wei's driving skills, she swerved her tail and crossed the break in the dirt road. She leaned forward and fell heavily on the painted asphalt road. Originally, the person who stopped in front of her was a red car waiting for someone. The driver was looking down at his phone when he saw a heavy motorcycle fall heavily from the top of his head. The line of the motorcycle was smooth, and the speed was so fast that it disappeared in the blink of an eye. So fucking cool. Could it be that they are shooting a movie? Did that motorcycle just come out of the top of our heads? Is there something hanging on it? I don't think so. In this day and age, even a motorcycle has to be taken out to show off. Fuck. Do you know what that motorcycle is? A BMW Tomahawk. Look at that model. It is the old version. It is probably out of production now. You can't buy it even if you want to trash. The sudden appearance of the BMW Tomahawk made the traffic flow at the train station a mess. In the small cities of China, there were very few people who really knew about cars. Even in the big cities, everyone was familiar with sports cars. For things like motorcycles, they always felt that except for Harley, the rest were not very valuable. This was also the reason why the rich lady thought that Hellion Vivian was very poor when she saw her. In fact, Hellion Wei Wei's BMW Tomahawk was just like what the driver had said. Because of the model, not everyone could buy it just because they wanted to. Hellion Wei Wei didn't get off the car. Instead, she leaned over and skimmed through the gap between the two cars. The night wind blew her long hair and clothes. Like a raging flame, she braked and stopped directly in the square of the train station. Her long legs supported the body of the car. With a wave of her fingers, she took off the helmet on her head. Originally, the surrounding people were already stunned speechless by this flashy scene. At this time, when they saw Wei Wei's beautiful little face, they immediately stopped breathing and widened their eyes. Hellion Vivian did not look at the commotion she caused. Instead, she looked at the unusual group of black crows and raised her eyebrows. So many black crows? No matter how powerful a little demon was, it was impossible to mobilize so many black crows. Those who knew about yin and yang exorcism knew that black crows were originally the true form of demons. After they became demons, they would transform into human forms and become demons that even bloodlings did not want to provoke. The Black Crows were an ancient and elegant race. They were very common in Britain and usually lived in castles. However, in China, there were so many of them. Unless a big figure came, they would never move out in groups in the train station. Bailey Shanxie was walking out with Qingchen in his arms. He was swaying like a roly-poly toy. Little Qingchen rubbed her eyes and finally woke up. She turned her head and looked at the exit. She wondered if Beauty Wei Wei had arrived. "What is your mother wearing?" Bailey Shanxie asked in a cool voice. Little Qingchen hummed. "It doesn't matter what she's wearing. It's easy to recognize her car." The two children's line of sight was blocked by the adults. Even if Bailey Shanxie was not carrying little Qingchen, it was difficult for them to see the scene outside the crowd. The human trafficker was different. The position where he set up the formation was directly facing the exit. When he focused his gaze, he saw the two little guys holding hands and trying their best to walk up the stairs. He could not see the face of the older one clearly, but the younger one was facing him. It was clearly the little brat who had almost caused him to suffer. Chapter 890. He had long felt that there was something wrong with these two children. Now that he saw them following him, he was even more certain of his suspicions. Not to mention other things, which 3-year-old child would take the train by himself. The black crows that were flying towards them all stopped behind the slightly bigger person, as if they had been summoned by him. The human trafficker looked at Bailey Shanxia's back from afar, and the corner of his mouth twitched into a cold smile. A little brat who knew a little bit of Taoist magic thought that he was invincible and wanted to trick him. He was courting death. The human trafficker did not hesitate. He took a step forward, bit his finger, and drew a cross on the ground. Then he flipped his palm and pressed the yellow talisman on the ground. With a soft hiss, the yellow talisman emitted a faint light and swayed in the air as if it was absorbing something. Soon, it filled the entire train station. After doing all this, the human trafficker curled his lips into a smile. This time, he wanted to see how these two brats and those damn black crows could escape. "Master, I've done everything. What else do you need?" The human trafficker was very excited. The voice on the other end of the phone was emotionless. "Find a place further away and draw another cross. This cross must be drawn at the most shady place for you to control the formation. Then you just have to wait. You'll see the effect in a while." Hearing this, the human trafficker's smile became even more sinister. It was as if he could already see the two little brats dying soon. He had seen the master use the formation in the past. He could take anyone's life as he wished. Now that he was doing it himself, the feeling was self-evident. He just had to wait for 3 minutes and use the formation to break the balance of the Earth's chi. These black crows would have all their souls sucked away. The two brats who did not know what was good for them would also be reduced to ashes. The black crows were the first to react. After all, compared to Bailey Shangxie, these black crows were just birds. They could not resist a formation deliberately set up by someone. When Bailey Shangxie was still holding little Qingqin's hand to climb up the stairs, the black crows seemed to be affected by something. Their eyes were shrouded in a black fog and were about to condense into a vicious aura. In the square, Hellion Vivian, who was holding the BMW tomahawk, paused in the middle of pulling out the key and looked behind her. The yang qi here was supposed to be very strong, but there was a strong current at this time. This current collided with each other and formed a yin qi vortex. Therefore, the yin and yang intertwined and formed a strong chaotic aura around the train station. It was easy to make people restless and evil thoughts. Who was the one who tampered with this? Was he trying to make all the black crows fall into a demonic state so that they could attack people randomly? Thinking of this, Hellion Wei Wei's eyes turned cold. The human trafficker looked at the black crows that were beginning to fly away and was secretly delighted. He thought that if he stood there, no one would be able to discover him. Even if the two brats were somewhat capable, they would be trapped alive by him in the end. He could do whatever he wanted. The human trafficker was planning to put another yellow talisman in the formation. However, he did not expect that when he bent down to take out the talisman, a beautiful BMW tomahawk would suddenly jump out from behind him and directly crush the formation. The rumbling sound was like the low roar of a tiger. The person in the car looked at him and then curled her thin lips into a faint smile. "Are you the one who kidnapped my little Qingqin?" The human trafficker's eyes were cold. He was not even afraid of the police now. Why would he be afraid of a woman? He reached out and wanted to use the formation's power to extract Hellion Vivian's soul. Following the movements of the human traffickers, thin black smoke gathered from all directions like little snakes. Each of the little snakes spat out their tongues and aimed at Hellion Wei Wei, who was on the battle axe. "Go to hell, you blind woman!" The human trafficker was already immersed in the thrill of killing. His eyes were burning and his face was filled with a savage smile. He really thought that it would be easy to kill Hellion Vivian. However, Hellion Vivian did not even move in the face of the black snakes that were surging toward her. She still maintained her cool posture of supporting herself with one leg. The black snakes immediately fell from midair and turned into black fog. When the wind blew, nothing was left. For the phoenixes of Buddhism, this kind of array formation was nothing more than child's play. One must know that the phoenix was the exalted Buddha who was immune to all evil. When the human trafficker saw this, the smile on his face completely froze. How could this be? How could the formation given to him by the master fail? Impossible. This was impossible. The human trafficker refused to believe it and wanted to use the formation again. However, the yellow talisman seemed to be stunned by someone's aura and did not move at all. Looking at the situation in front of him, the human trafficker understood that he had kicked an iron plate. His opponent was definitely someone who knew sorcery. But that should not be the case. One must know that he had used a 9-turn yellow talisman that was stained with blood. Even if it was daytime, it should not have failed so easily. How powerful could this woman be? Unless he had encountered the Pei family. When he thought of this possibility, the human trafficker immediately broke out in cold sweat. When the master was casting the spell, she had once mentioned that if he encountered someone from the Pei family, it was best not to have any evil thoughts. He should also try his best to hide his evil thoughts. Otherwise, he would be dealt with immediately. This was because that was the real exorcist tribe. Since ancient times, they had been cleaning up sins that ordinary people could not see. If he had encountered someone from the Pei family, he would be in big trouble. Unless the Grand Master himself was here, he had no chance of winning. After realizing this, the human trafficker didn't even bother to pick up the yellow talisman on the ground. His sinister eyes swept over the old woman who was walking over from the side. He pushed the old woman forward and ran away. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes and used her long legs to support the old woman. Just as she was about to give chase, the old woman reached out and grabbed her sleeve. The old woman looked at Hellion Vivian as if she was looking at an enemy. Don't think of leaving. Do you think you can leave after bumping into me? Do you think you can get away so easily? Hearing this shout, many people on the other side of the square looked in this direction. The old woman could not be blamed for having such a misconception. She had felt a gust of wind blow her away and thought that the other party's motorcycle had hit her. Old people would often have such misconceptions. Usually, when encountering such a situation, it was really difficult to explain, especially when there was no video recording. The bystanders did not know what was going on and surrounded them. They thought that the person riding the tomahawk would not be able to explain herself and would have to go to the police station. If the old lady was a local and had connections in her family, then this matter would definitely be more difficult to deal with. The result of this matter seemed to be predictable. The police patrolling the square also walked over and was about to ask what had happened. In the face of the old woman's slander, Hellion Vivian, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke. She said to the police, "I want to record a statement with a voice recorder." The police paused and could not react. After all, the other party's tone was too smooth, as if she knew the whole process better than they did. "If you don't have a voice recorder, I have one." Hellion Vivian chuckled and removed the glasses on her windbreaker, revealing a black recording device. She looked at the old woman and said unhurriedly, "Did you think that I rushed out from behind you and hit you, causing you to fall?" "Yes." The old woman was still panting with anger when she said this. In fact, she herself did not know what caused her to fall, but there was such a car in front of her, and it was very fast. She must have been hit by the other party. After getting such an unreasonable answer, Hellion Wei felt as if 10,000 alpacas were galloping through her heart, but her tone was still very indifferent. "Let me confirm with you again. Just now, did you think that I rushed out from behind you and then hit you, causing you to fall? Are you sure you didn't remember wrongly?" For some reason, the police felt that when the other party was speaking, she seemed to have deliberately emphasized the word behind. He seemed to have only heard such a way of speaking in one place, and that was in court. There was no mistake. In court, there were often lawyers who used such a way of speaking when questioning their clients. "Yes. How many times do you want me to say it? I was walking on this road. If you didn't hit me from behind, would I fall? Don't think that I'm old and muddle-headed. I know everything." The old woman was still a little dizzy when she fell, and now even her arm was a little painful. She only wanted Hellion Vivian to take responsibility. However, what she did not expect, and what the surrounding people did not expect, was that Hellion Vivian put away the recording pen and handed it to the police. Then, she pointed at her BMW Tomahawk and pointed at the old woman opposite her. Then, she said neither slowly nor slowly, "Just now, the old woman said that the person who hit her rushed out from behind. The front of my motorcycle was facing this old woman. Whether it is in terms of physics or the path, it is impossible for me to rush over from behind the old woman. May I ask if I can leave now?" When the old woman, who was still rubbing her arm, heard this, she was dumbfounded. "Wait a minute, I think." The old woman rubbed her head and wanted to say something. Hellion Wei interrupted her directly and laughed mockingly. Old madam, I confirmed with you twice, and you've repeated it yourself. All the evidence is in the recording. Are you going to say that you've remembered wrongly again? The old woman's words were suddenly choked in her throat, and her face was burning red. The surrounding people understood what was going on. They never thought of using this method to prove themselves. It was simply 100 points of wittiness. Most of the time, these things would go back and forth. That was because the moment they arrived at the police station, they would encounter ambiguous answers. Under normal circumstances, regardless of whether you were the one who hit the person, as long as it looked like you were the one who hit the person, you would have to take responsibility. Even if she was wronged, there was nothing she could do. However, Helene Vivian directly found the most important evidence and asked the old woman again and again, letting the old woman reveal the loophole. In this way, what the truth was would naturally be determined. Now, people had suffered too much in this aspect. Now that they saw Helene Vivian doing this, they always felt that they had vented their stuffiness. Some people even couldn't help but shout, "Well done!" The police had never met such a person, and looked at Helene Vivian with eyes full of surprise. The old woman knew that she had misunderstood, so she didn't say anything. However, at the same time, she couldn't bring herself to say that she was wrong in public. She could only hug her arm and cry out in pain as if she was escaping. Helene Vivian didn't even look at her. She would never waste time on such a person. She couldn't catch up with her, so she simply walked to the place where she had just cast the spell. She bent down and picked up the yellow talisman on the ground. That yellow talisman didn't look like one that was commonly seen in the market. In her memory, she seemed to have seen such a talisman before, but she was a little vague about what it was. The only thing she was sure of was that this yellow talisman wasn't simple. Helene Vivian turned her face to the side and pressed on the Bluetooth headset with her slender fingers. "Monkey, I have a talisman here. Help me check its origin." After saying that, she directly took a high-definition picture with her iPhone and sent it over. The call finally got through, but Monkey didn't immediately check the picture. Instead, he asked anxiously, "Boss, did you find the little boss? He must be hungry now. Those human traffickers better not let me catch them. Otherwise, I will skin them alive." Helene Vivian was stunned. Right, little Chin-Chin, Beauty Wei Wei is never late. She must have encountered something. Little Chin-Chin held the bowl of noodles that Bailey Shanxia bought for her with two small hands. She wasn't anxious at all. Her small mouth blew on the noodles, and then held the bowl of noodles and drank a mouthful of hot soup. "It tastes like braised beef. Do you want to have a mouthful?" Just as Bailey Shanxia nodded, little Chin-Chin clumsily held the bowl of noodles and fed it to him. She was just short of saying something like, "Big brother, drink the soup." The two little people sat on the steps of the exit with their heads touching each other, drinking the hot soup. The scene was extremely cute. During this time, Bailey Shanxia rolled up Chin-Chin's sleeves twice. When he rolled up Chin-Chin's sleeves for the third time, Helene Vivian just happened to rush over. As Helene Chin-Chin and Bailey Shanxia's clothes had been changed, at first, Helene Vivian only glanced at them. When she saw the little person who was strenuously holding the bowl of noodles to feed someone, Helene Vivian curled her lips and smiled. She strode over with her long legs. Chapter 891. Bailey Shanxia was the first to notice that there was someone behind them. He put down Chin-Chin's hand and stared at a certain spot with his red eyes. His handsome little face was full of vigilance. When Chin-Chin saw that the little devil she wanted to raise had stopped moving, her little hand also paused. She followed Bailey Shanxia's gaze and turned her head. Her eyes suddenly widened and sparkled like a furry little squirrel. That kind of happiness was so obvious that even Bailey Shanxia couldn't help but raise his little eyebrows. At this moment, Helene Vivian had already walked in front of the two little people. She bent down and carried Chin-Chin up and rubbed her hard in her arms. Sounds immediately came from the other side of the phone. The six rough men shouted at each other, afraid that the other side couldn't hear them. "Boss, have you found little boss? I'm going over now. I'll definitely be there in less than half an hour." "Old A, can you be more skilled in lying? It'll take at least an hour to reach the train station from here." "Little boss, don't listen to him. Look at me. I made you an omelet today. It's very delicious. Look at the situation now. Why are you still talking about your ugly omelet? Little boss, buy whatever you want at the train station. I have a box of money here. You can eat whatever you want. Helene Vivian's ears hurt from the noise. She said to her son, "Come, say something into the ear, Mike." Chinchin was very cooperative. Her little hand took off Helene Vivian's earpiece and said seriously, "I've already eaten a bowl of noodles. My new friend bought it for me." Friend? When the rough men who were driving heard this, they all paused and had different thoughts in their minds. They felt that this new friend had taken away little boss's attention from them. What should they do? All right, that's all I have to say. Let's meet at the original location. See you in 2 hours. Helene Wei hung up the phone after she finished speaking and set her earphones to silent mode. After doing all this, Helene Vivian looked at Bailey Shangxia, who hadn't said a word. Bailey Shangxia was also sizing up Helene Vivian. The black crows behind him landed one after another, their eyes filled with the unique bloodthirsty evil of demons. I heard that you like chocolate very much? Helene Vivian smiled and bent down. She wanted to pass the bag of chocolates that she always carried with her to Bailey Shangxia. The chocolates inside were all handmade. Each of them was in the shape of a ball, which was very attractive. Bailey Shangxia did not extend his hand. Helene Vivian directly opened the 2 balls and fed one to him and the other to Chinchin. Bailey Shangxia had never been fed by anyone in his life. His cool little face was a little uncomfortable, but this didn't affect his enjoyment of the chocolate at all. Chinchin was also eating happily. Her little mouth was black. She held the bag of chocolates in her left hand and reached out to hold Bailey Shangxia's hand with her right hand. Bailey Shangxia already had the self-awareness of being an older brother. Knowing that he couldn't walk steadily, he directly held Chinchin's hand and walked forward while chewing the chocolate in his mouth. Helene Vivian raised her eyebrows. She thought that this was good. She didn't need to hold Chinchin's hand anymore. Someone else could do it for her. Beauty Vivian, you told the uncles to gather at the original location. Where is the original location? Chinchin finished the chocolate in her mouth and wanted to eat another one. Helene Vivian raised her hand and took back the bag of chocolates. She said casually, "On a green train. The leader of the abductors is there. They want to carry out the transaction there." Hearing this, the 2 little ones looked at each other and said in unison, "We'll go too." Helene Vivian smiled. "I can take you there, but don't let the incident at the small hotel happen again." A person's soul mysteriously disappears. If there are too many cases of such strange deaths, it will alarm the police. What we want to do this time is not only to kill them, but also to destroy their organization. Do you understand? Was she talking about the Little Highness? Black Crow, who had already recovered his original form, turned his eyes. He thought about the exorcist who told him to pay attention to the Little Highness last time. It seemed that the Little Highness had taken away his magical power on the spot. There was also the vampire hunter in England who was beaten up by the Little Highness until he couldn't get out of bed for 7 days. This time, how would the Little Highness deal with the other party? However, what Black Crow didn't expect was that the Little Highness just nodded coolly, as if he could guarantee that he could do it. Oh my God! The Little Highness wouldn't even listen to the king. Moreover, the Little Highness had always liked to go against the king. This was probably the first time the Little Highness listened to someone. Was it going to rain red from the sky? Just because of a chocolate ball? The Black Crows looked at each other in silence. They felt that the whole world was a fantasy. Bailey Shangxia obviously knew what the Black Crows were thinking. He raised his eyes and glanced at them. His gaze was extremely cold. The Black Crows shivered and immediately straightened their bodies, looking forward with great interest. Helene Vivian didn't waste any time. She wrapped the 2 little ones in her windbreaker and placed them at the front of the BMW Tomahawk. It was equivalent to 3 people sitting on a motorcycle. Bailey Shangxia had never sat on a motorcycle before, and he had never been so close to anyone. However, he had the demeanor of an older brother. He hugged Chinchin from behind with his 2 small hands. He was afraid that the wind would blow her, so he even covered her hands with his windbreaker. Helene Vivian sat at the back. She reached out and buckled her helmet. Her voice was clear as she said, "Hold on tight, let's go." With a whoosh, the motorcycle started moving. The Tomahawk BMW cut through the late spring night in the most beautiful manner. Along the way, the laughter of the two little ones could be heard, as if they were playing some interesting game. Helly and Vivian seemed to have just thought of something. She sped up and said to Bailey Shanxia, "Do you want the black crows behind us to inform your family where you are going?" "No." Bailey Shanxia shook his head. He thought about it and added, "I'm running away from home." Helly and Vivian, Ching Chin, didn't he get kidnapped? Since when did he become running away from home? Anyway, no one at home cares about me. Bailey Shanxia's voice was getting softer and softer. I've never been loved at home. The crows that were flying around almost fell from the sky when they heard this. You have the final say in the entire demon world. What else do you want, my little highness? I've always been obedient to my father. Bailey Shanxia lowered his head again, but he has never found anything good about me. He even said that if I get expelled again, he won't let me go to kindergarten anymore. Chapter 892. Black Crow, mainly because it was rare to see a 12-year-old being expelled from a school in just a month. Indeed, as long as the king's name was mentioned, everything could be settled, but to let you continue eating people in school? Little Highness, that's a kindergarten, not a cattle ranch. Also, when have you ever listened to the king? Even if you want to lie, you have to have a conscience. Bailey Shanxia was not moved at all, because he liked how he was now. He was holding a soft little girl in his arms, and someone was feeding him chocolate. Little Ching Chun looked very worrisome, and she was even wobbling when she walked. Of course, he had to find a way to stay openly. Black Crow, it's not your fault that other people's children can't walk properly. Besides, what was your first reaction when you saw people in the past? Eating. When have you ever cared whether other children can walk properly? Don't use such kind words to deceive the audience. Okay. Bailey Shanxia gave Black Crow a warning look as he passed by him, and turned his head to the left. It was said that this angle made him look more pitiful. After adjusting his posture, Bailey Shanxia continued, and recently, he's planning to marry a woman I don't know at all to be my stepmother. I don't like that. Black Crow, in order to stay, you're already using unscrupulous means to become the king of darkness, Little Highness. Anyone would believe you if they heard you say that. As expected, Hellion Vivian freed a hand and rubbed his head. Since you don't want to go back, you can sleep with Chin for a few days if you think it's okay. Okay. Bailey Shanxia obviously thought it was okay. He was waiting for this sentence. Hellion Vivian smiled, and thought to herself, I wonder who's so scumbag that he's willing to neglect his own son for a woman. His Highness, who was mistaken for a scumbag, was currently sitting in the first-class cabin of a flight to the Yungue district. His slender legs were naturally crossed, and he was holding a wine glass filled with red liquid in his hand. His face was reflected in the window of the cabin. Dressed in a black suit, he looked like the king of the night. The stewardesses had already looked over here more than once. That handsome face against the light that seemed to be cast by a knife was unusually handsome and could make people's hearts beat faster. They had seen a lot of people, including celebrities and CEOs of entrepreneurs, but none of them were as impressive as the man in front of them. His skin was as white as fine porcelain, and his temperament was more like those European aristocrats that were often mentioned in movies. He looked condescending, as if all living things were just a bunch of ants in his eyes. The stewardesses looked at his short silver hair and wanted to take the opportunity to talk to him. One of them didn't even wait and pushed the cart over. Sir, do you want me to give you another glass of red wine? No need. His voice was very cold. It was as if the moment he opened his mouth, the temperature of the surroundings would rise. The stewardess smiled and didn't care about the rejection. Men with capital were always very arrogant, and she liked to challenge anything that was impossible. Then I'll cover you with a blanket. The plane will land in 20 minutes. As she spoke, the stewardess wanted to bend over and touch Beligaju. Bailey Jiaju didn't say anything. He glanced sideways at her. The color of blood slowly flowed in his eyes. The coldness within immediately made the stewardess freeze. Azure Dragon, who was sitting next to him, reacted the fastest. He blocked the stewardess and said in a faint voice, We don't need a blanket. You can go out. The stewardess was embarrassed. She didn't say anything and pushed the cart away. She had never been rejected like this before. After the cabin was quiet, Beligaju took off his suit jacket without thinking and threw it aside. Azure Dragon and Fire Qilin looked at him again. They thought that their master was still the same as before. Except for the princess. Anyone who touched him would end up badly. If the stewardess had come a little closer, she would probably have died immediately. Their master's character had never changed because of the 3 years of settling down. Instead, what covered his body was layer after layer of indifference. It was as if the disappearance of the princess had taken away the only warm side of their master. They didn't know if they could successfully find the princess this time. Just as Azure Dragon and Fire Qilin were thinking about this, a large number of black crows covered the top of the plane. At such a high altitude, these black crows shouldn't have appeared. Therefore, when the plane's detector showed that there was an unknown object approaching, the captain's heart skipped a beat. He immediately ordered people to investigate the situation. A group of black crows? Are you kidding me? Why are there black crows here? The captain had been flying for so many years, but he had never encountered such a situation. The co-pilot also frowned. When we took off, I saw a news report saying that a train was surrounded by a group of black crows after passing through a tunnel. Did we encounter the same situation? Black crows surrounding a train? The captain felt that the whole world was nonsense. The co-pilot nodded. It said that they were affected by light and sound waves. What about the train? What happened in the end? The captain only wanted to know if it would be dangerous if this continued. The co-pilot thought for a moment and said, "Nothing. Everything is normal. It's just that the black crows will always follow. Forget it. Let's find a way to avoid them." This was the captain's last thought. After all, they had no choice but to see how to fly without being affected. The most important thing was to ensure safety. Planes were different from trains. Sometimes something went wrong. The existence of a bird could cause a devastating accident. Fortunately, everything seemed to be normal. However, the zoologists who received the news began to make a commotion. They said that this must be a sign that the black crows were migrating to the east. They also linked the appearance of these black crows to the melting of the Arctic ice. Those zoologists who studied animals never thought that the reason for these black crows' appearance was very simple. It was just that their owner was on the plane. When the black crows were disturbed, Beligaju would be the first to sense it. Therefore, when he noticed that someone was doing something, he decided to fly to the Yungue area. However, the human trafficker who did this had no idea who he was about to face. He planned to wait until he met the master, so that the master could find a way to capture the two little people again and turn them into ghosts. Chapter 893. After more than 9 hours of hiding, the traffickers finally arrived at the warehouse before 2 in the morning. The so-called warehouse was a place where the abducted children were kept. These children were abducted from all over the country. Some of them were starved for 2 days when they grew up and only sold when they became obedient. Some of them were only a week old, and their memories were not fully formed yet. These children were the easiest to take care of. As long as a few professional nannies were found to take care of them for 2 or 3 days, they would be able to find a buyer. Regardless of the situation, as long as these children were out of the warehouse, it would be difficult to find them again. This was because they would be sold to many places. In the countryside, boys were the most popular. Often, there were people who could not bear children, so they would spend money to buy them. A child would range from 20 to 50,000 yuan. After buying them, as long as the child was registered, the child would belong to them. Even if the police wanted to investigate, they would not be able to find anything. Those who were not obedient would be sold to the beggar camp by the traffickers. The beggar camp had its own power in the local area, and it had its own perfect household registration system. Breaking the children's legs and making them beg on the side of the road was the best way to make money. At this time, even if you called the police, it would be useless because no one would care. Moreover, even if you wanted to, you would not know where to start. There were too many people in the mainland. Once the children sold by the traffickers were legally adopted, they would form a natural protective layer. Many times, many people, whether rich or poor, would search the whole of China in order to find their lost child. They would search for a year, 3 years, or even longer. In fact, not being able to find them was not the cruelest thing. The cruelest thing was that one day, when you passed by a street and felt that a child was very pitiful, you would give him $1, but you would not recognize that the child was the son that you had been thinking about. Because too much time had passed, and children change their appearance day by day. How could it be so easy? Coincidentally, I recognized you, and you recognized me. Reality was not an idle drama. When many parents found their child with the help of the police, the child would only feel that you were a stranger. Thus, they began to pray. Even if the child was not by their side, they still hoped that there would be a pair of parents who would treat them better after buying them. That would be better than being a beggar with broken limbs. However, the human traffickers never understood this. In their eyes, there was only money. With the backing behind them, they wouldn't have to worry about being found out. As long as they were local tyrants, some things didn't need to be said for everyone to understand. White Dao wouldn't touch them at all. This was also the reason why the human trafficker relaxed as soon as he arrived at the warehouse. He had nothing to be afraid of in his territory. The human trafficker knew that since the other party had found him at the train station, she would definitely not let him go. However, he was not worried at all. They had the final say in this area. Even if the exorcist family came, they could still kill her. When the human trafficker thought of this, he immediately dialed the number of the higher-ups and told the whole story to Godfather Liu. Godfather Liu was a shrewd person. That night, he was drinking with a certain someone. After the call ended, he used the glass in his hand to touch the other person's. If there's a problem, I'll have to ask you to take care of me, big brother. Of course I know how to take care of you. But six brother, let me remind you, don't go overboard. While drinking, one of them spoke to Godfather Liu as if he was talking to his comrades. If it's time to rein it in, then rein it in. Don't make things difficult for everyone on the surface. Yes, you're right, big brother. After Godfather Liu finished speaking, he said to the hostess who was accompanying him, "Why are you in a daze? Can't you see that big brother has wine in his glass? Hurry up and fill it up." The hostess smiled. There was a hint of charm in her innocence. She deliberately sat closer to one of them and poured wine into his glass. It could be said that both the host and the guest enjoyed themselves to the fullest. After they finished drinking, they asked the hostess to send the man back to the most luxurious suite in the hotel. This was something that everyone was well aware of. Today, no one would check the green train from Yungue district to somewhere else. The mainland was not like other places. Some organizations' connections were not that useful. Once there was someone in charge, it was even more difficult to make a move. This was also the reason why human trafficking was so blatant in this area. Helly and Vivian did not drive directly to the train station. Instead, she brought the two children into an internet cafe. The internet cafe was very close to the train station. There were many people playing games inside. As it was already past 2 in the morning, the person at the front desk was a little tired. When he heard someone come in, he did not raise his head and said, "Do you want to stay open all night, or by the hour? It's 10 yuan for the whole night. If it's by the hour, it's 5 yuan per hour for non-members and 3 yuan per hour for members." "I'm looking for Old Cat, your boss." When the name Old Cat came out, the receptionist who was lying on the keyboard immediately raised his head. He glanced at Helly and Vivian and saw the two children behind her. He frowned and said, "Are you sure you're looking for our boss?" "Yes." As Helly and Vivian spoke, she took out the phone she always carried and showed the photo to the receptionist. The receptionist's expression became even more strange. He muttered, "Why did you bring 2 children with you when you came out to do business?" He took the things and stood up. "Our boss is behind you. He said that someone will come today and is waiting." Helly and Vivian walked over with the 2 children. The receptionist went around the front yard and knocked on the door 3 times. Then he pushed the door open and let Helly and Vivian and the 2 children in. The room wasn't big, but it was filled with the aroma of tea. There was a wooden table in the center of the room, and on top of the table was a tea set. Beside it was a purple toad. It was translucent, and it was obvious that it was extraordinary. Yungue region produced tea and loved to drink tea. They all had their own tea sets. However, it was unusual for such an internet cafe to have a priceless purple toad. The person drinking tea was a middle-aged man. He wore a string of prayer beads on his hand. When he saw Hellion Vivian come in, he raised his head slightly and said, "You were introduced by Master Monkey?" Master Monkey? Qingchen found this name familiar. Her little ears twitched. She did not know that Uncle Monkey had such an honorific name. Hellion Vivian smiled faintly and nodded. She did not say anything. The middle-aged man sized her up and then looked at little Qingchen and little Shanxia behind her. "Miss, I know what you want to investigate. But since Master Monkey introduced you here, I'd like to remind you that there are rules everywhere, especially when it comes to the business of selling children. There are some things that you shouldn't be involved in, so it's better for you to stay away from them." Chapter 894. Oh! Hellion Vivian seemed to be interested. She played with the teacup in her hand and said, "I'd like to know what the rules are. I don't know how you know Master Monkey, but since you asked, I'll tell you about it. It's not like the higher-ups haven't sent people to investigate the sale of children, but very few people have found anything. Even if they know something, they will find a way to suppress it. Besides, this kind of thing requires evidence. If they don't catch the culprit in the act, no one will believe them. But usually, once there's a movement in the legal world, the other side will quickly notice. Speaking of which, you should understand that you can't do anything to this place. Since you can't do anything, it's better not to take the risk. What if I insist?" Hellion Vivian put down the teacup. She still had a smile on her face, but the warmth in her eyes gradually disappeared. The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "The young people in the underworld are so ignorant. Let me give you a simple example. Do you know why we Chinese people talk about business at the table? Because this is the rule of the mainland. No matter how developed those foreigners are, they can't do well in the local area. It's because they don't understand that in the mainland, it's not enough to just have money. They also need people. In other words, this sixth master has someone protecting him from above." Hellion Wei's mouth curved into a smile. The middle-aged man didn't deny it. He picked up the teapot and poured himself a cup of tea. "I don't think your family has a strong background, and you're a young girl who just came out. Master Monkey seems to mean that you work for the underworld. You should think about it yourself. It's fine if you don't care about this matter. If you do, you may make your superiors unhappy. Why bother, right?" Hellion Vivian didn't answer. The middle-aged man thought that she was finally persuaded by him, so he felt relieved. After all, he had a good relationship with Master Lu, and he knew how muddy the water was. He didn't want to offend Master Monkey. After all, he really couldn't afford to offend him. Since Master Monkey had introduced him, he naturally had to help. However, it was not worth it for him to offend Old Six for the sake of this young lady. "It's good that you've thought it through." The middle-aged man stood up with a smile, intending to see him off. From beginning to end, Hellion Wei didn't move at all. Just as he was about to open the door, she turned around beautifully and handcuffed him to the wooden chair. After doing all this, Hellion Vivian turned around and looked at the two little people. "Take whatever you like. Don't be shy. Old Cat is so generous. He won't mind." The middle-aged man didn't know whether to be shocked by her beautiful skills or angry at her bandit's words. In short, no one liked to be inexplicably roasted. However, Old Cat was the second in command of the Yungue district after all. He wouldn't lose his cool. He only said coldly, "Do you know what you're doing? I only set aside some time to meet you for the sake of Master Monkey. If it weren't for Master Monkey, you would have been targeted as soon as you entered the Yungue district. Do you think you could have survived to see Six, brother? Don't be so naive. It's easy to kill someone silently here. Don't forget that the border is just ahead." "Are you saying that I've been relying on your protection until now?" Hellion Vivian laughed softly. The middle-aged man snorted and said, "What do you think? Old Sixth has been targeting you since you brought 2 children into the Yungue district." Hellion Vivian looked at him and laughed again. "Little Shanxia, tell Old Cat what happens to those who target us." Bailey Shanxia let go of little Qingchen's hand when he heard that he had something to do. He walked toward the middle-aged man. His scarlet eyes slowly glowed with a scalp-numbing light. The middle-aged man's hair stood on end. He raised the prayer beads in his hand with trembling hands. You? Stupid human. Bailey Shanshiek curled his lips into a smile. He looked indescribably bloodthirsty. However, he didn't seem to be interested in the middle-aged man. He obeyed Hellion Vivian's order and glanced at the middle-aged man. Then he turned his head and continued to help Qingshan pack her things. Qingshan was still wobbling when she walked. Although she was small, her ability to recognize things was top-notch. She grabbed the purple toad with her small hand and stuffed it into Bailey Shanshia's pocket. Keep it for me. After we sell it, Beauty Weiwei will give me pocket money. Then we can buy chocolate ice cream together. Okay. No matter how cool Bailey Shangxia was when it came to little Qingshan, he still acted like a good brother who would listen to whatever she said. On the other hand, the middle-aged man was so scared that he desperately tried to break free from the handcuffs. Hellion Vivian still had a smile in her voice. Don't be nervous. Little Shangxia is just joking with you. Our little Shangxia is still very picky about food. However, if you still want to persuade me not to do anything and don't give me the things I want, then I'm not sure if he won't be impatient and let you see his less gentle side. You. The middle-aged man was scared and angry. He gritted his teeth. Even if I give you the things, you can't carry them on the train. There are so many things. You're just a small police officer. Can you carry them? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. You don't have to worry about this. I know more about firearms than you. I want to talk to Master Monkey on the phone. The middle-aged man wanted to ask Master Monkey to talk to this little girl who came to him and threatened him. He wanted to let her know the consequences of provoking him. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. She swiped her phone and started a video call. When Monkey saw the number, he immediately answered. Boss, what's wrong? Does little boss miss me? Fuck Monkey. Why are you so shameless? If little boss misses you, it should be me. Old A was still growling. Hellion Vivian interrupted the few rough men who were fighting for favor. Monkey, Old Cat wants to talk to you. Oh, him? Monkey was obviously not interested. Hellion Vivian raised her hand and handed the phone to the middle-aged man. Answer it. Old Cat seemed to have been waiting for a long time. As soon as he touched the phone, he said in a low voice, Master Monkey, I respect you, but this time, the girl you found is too unkind. I only said a few words to her, and she handcuffed me. And the child she brought is also that you're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.